not going to cry a river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people.
What the ain't no way he's talking about Palestinians, right?
They'd be doing the same thing. And how much did they kill? As many as they can. They're not able to kill as many people as Israel because they don't have as many bombs and as many weapons. But if they did, they'd be doing the same thing.
Oh my God, I hate this argument so much, bro. This is crazy. Holy what is this? This is the full clip?
I want to consider a genocide as a systematic killing of a group of people. They have genocide built into Sharia law.
Bro, oh my God, bro, oh my God. It's so funny because like his analysis right here is the liberal analysis. When you scratch the surface of like the average American over a certain age and why they are so blind to the obvious dynamic, the obvious inequalities, the obvious inhumanity of Israel's operations, they literally agree with this. They also think this. You only arrive at this conclusion after years and years and years of social conditioning that justify the world, the war on terror, America's war on terror, and the unironic justifications for this war on terror required the dehumanization of Arabs and Muslims and every single person that lives in that part of the region. Because if you were to look at the situation and recognize that humans are being blown apart every single day so that America can secure oil fields in Iraq, you would go crazy. So you have to either, on the one hand, omit key details, but also every single time you cover the atrocities, have to make it seem like they are, you know, worthy targets or collateral damage that is permissible. Why is it permissible? Because they're not really human beings.
Don't have as many bombs and as many weapons. But if they did, they'd be doing the same thing. That's it. Just takes enough. That's right. These people are not your allies. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture.
Asmongold, your co-owner of your organization, you are calling a person from an inferior culture. What are you doing? Log off the internet, stop reading Reddit, and go talk to some real humans, please. Holy shit.
That is horrible. It kills people for their identity, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all ways. It is that simple.
Bro, this is straight up one-to-one what Nazis said about Jewish people, what like the most right-wing approach to this conversation. This kind of attitude, American exceptionalism, literally is the same thing. You're just removing American exceptionalist sentiment that is baked into American society, Western superiority. You're just taking the thing that shelters it and the thing that makes it like the norm. When you remove the outside patina, the skeleton remains. This is the skeleton. This is the bare bones, okay? This is the bare bones of the argument that like America is the best country on earth. When you remove the outside stuff that makes it, I guess, seemingly more appropriate for liberal consumption, okay, in an otherwise liberal society, this is what you arrive at. I don't think, like, I think he popped off on this, not thinking that like this would be, there would be a lot of repercussions for this.
And you know what else is disgusting? That people in the West enjoy more privileges and freedom than anywhere else in the world romanticize their behavior or their lifestyle as anything other than barbaric.
This is what people think you say about Israel. I know. I know. Like, if you were to say this about Judaism, understandably and rightfully, you would get banned, and you should get banned. Like, if I were to ever say this about, if I were to ever say like, oh, Jewish culture is this way, I would literally be Adolf Hitler, okay? It's fucking ridiculous. For the record, I don't believe that about Judaism, regardless of how much my psychopathic rabid haters try to claim I believe it.
I know plenty of Muslims that respect gays. Well, I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm talking about people in Palestine. The truth is that that's what they do.
Dude, come on, dude. What? Palestinian culture as a whole? How the... Dude... This is your brain on Reddit. This is your brain on Reddit. If you don't interact with normal people, if you don't talk to people on a daily basis, and the only way that you're getting information from, your only outlet to the outside world is just simply Reddit, you arrive at this conclusion. It's like literally a vector of radicalization against Muslims, Islamophobia, and also specifically Palestinians. That's crazy. It's also additionally ironic when we talk about LGBTQ support, because this community, like his community, hates gay people in representation and in like video games. So what the that's the other part of this that I don't understand. It's like, oh, Western culture is so superior. We love the gays, except I throw a fit every time I see them in my video games. But it's bad when Palestinians, I have imagined an alternative reality when Palestinians also do that. And I hate it when they do that. Okay, Asmongold wants to talk. He said, hello?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. All right. Asmon.
Okay. Yes.
In the interest of fairness, I want you to explain what you said that I saw in limited clips earlier today, I think.
Okay, so basically, I find it to be really problematic that people put like a lot of virtue signaling, and I think it is virtue signaling, for people that are supportive for like trans rights and LGBT rights when they support countries that kill people and prosecute them for being LGBT. I think it's a huge problem, and I don't think you can have both of those things.
So when you were saying like Palestinians exhibit inferior culture that's barbaric, you were simply talking about the hypocrisy? Is that what it is?
Yeah, pretty much. I do. And somebody in my chat said that you said that I thought Christian theocracy was better.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, what a fucking surprise. Okay. Well, here's the thing, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I want you to like fully explain, because I want to understand everything that you mean beyond the hypocrisy, because like the hypocrisy version, or the hypocrisy in and of itself, is one thing that we can address. It's a super simple concept.
Well,
but I think
there's
there's always a broader point beyond hypocrisy, because online hypocrisy in and of itself, or even the invocation of hypocrisy or perceived hypocrisy, is seemingly a more damaging thing than like actual material harm, right? Oh, this person is hypocritical, and that's like a very common fucking thing. Yeah. I'm sure you experience it on a regular basis as well. It doesn't really matter.
Most hypocrisy, I think, is derived from a misunderstanding that is often deliberate. I see it oftentimes with you. You've seen it with me. Everybody has it happen. It's extremely common on the internet. Yeah.
It's the Andrew Tate phenomenon, right? Where people don't give a fuck about like what Andrew Tate may have done or may not have done, or all the shit that he has definitely done, right?
Yeah.
And care more about like, you know, perceived hypocrisy. Usually they care more about that than anything else. So I don't really,
I think there's a Norm Macdonald clip about that. It was very good.
Yeah, I don't necessarily care about hypocrisy that much, but in terms of the hypocrisy of the matter, I can explain it to you.
Sure.
Number one, so in terms of LGBTQ acceptance, right? Trans acceptance, queer acceptance, you find that to be, in the United States of America, in the wealthiest nation on earth, one of the most prosperous nations on the planet, to be to a certain degree, like a fancy thing to advocate for, right?
I don't think that you have to be rich to advocate for LGBT acceptance.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, what are you saying? Sorry.
No. What I'm simply saying is that LGBTQ representation in video games is oftentimes considered to be something that is like unnecessary, or something that is considered to be...
you're talking about like in games?
In games, in facets of culture, in facets of media.
Yeah, sometimes it happens. It feels like it's inauthentic. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, wait, is there a positive example of LGBTQ representation that you can think of in mainstream media in recent years?
Sure.
Just so I understand what the dynamic is there.
Did you play Final Fantasy 16?
I did not.
Oh my God. So they had a character in Final Fantasy 16. His name was Dion, and he was like the prince of an area. He was like the, like person who could like channel Bahamut, right? And he was gay, and it was part of the story. And they actually blocked sale for that game in some places in the Middle East because Square Enix didn't want to censor the game for that reason. And I
But you,
respected them a lot for that.
but that was, wait, they refused to block the game? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, yeah, Square Enix did not do
Yeah.
that.
And that was a good representation of like gay or trans.
Yeah, I think so. I really do.
Okay.
I think that whenever you create a character, that the character's personality, sometimes it feels like when characters are added into stories, especially if they have like an LGBT like lean to them, they can be turned into being like a one-dimensional like I guess identification of that person. And it's like they make like an overt effort to talk about that and discuss it. And I feel like in a lot of times it can come off as patronizing or talking down to the audience.
Okay.
It feels very inauthentic to me.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there are instances where there's like gay representation, trans representation that's like ham-fisted and just simply
Yeah.
added on as
Yeah, I think
not
so.
a not a necessary vehicle for narrative development, but instead simply for identity points, right?
Sure.
To do diversity. Okay, so not to get too lost in the sauce, we can get back to this part of the conversation in a second. But my point was that like that level of LGBTQ representation, it's for diversity, it's for marketing purposes. Usually, it's just like sometimes it could be shitty narrative devices, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. But a lot of people still get mad at it, right? A lot of people in the Western world still get mad at it. And for me in particular, there is a hierarchy of needs for and that all human beings respond to, all human beings exist under.
Is this like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or is this like something else?
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is appropriate, but like there's a higher standard because the Maslow's hierarchy of needs usually is under the confines of like at least a developed country, where a developed country that is not constantly being bombarded or victims of like colonial occupation. My point is that Palestinians are not inherently anti-gay or anti-trans or anything like that. There are gay Palestinians, there are trans Palestinians, both living in Gaza, in historic Palestine, and also certainly outside of Gaza.
Well, is it against the law?
The problem is there is no time or space or opportunity for them to engage in queer liberation, let alone, advocate for more representation in their artworks, for example, when they're too busy being bombed and destroyed and killed and ethnically displaced for 76 years under an apartheid regime that is a settler colonial occupation.
Okay, real quick. You don't think that I support Israel, do you?
I don't, but I think that...
Good.
No, I don't think you support Israel, but I think you saying that like Palestinians are immoral or evil or have an evil, antiquated culture or are barbaric is not only ahistorical. What's up?
I do think that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think you're wrong.
I don't know, man. Like, how can you be in support of a culture that tells people that they can't be who they want to be? Like, I mean, really, I mean, if I was advocating for what the laws were there, I would get banned for hate speech. How's that acceptable?
Yeah, I think you are misunderstanding what their culture is, what the Palestinian culture is, and you're also not setting the standard under the material conditions in which they exist.
I don't think that you can do that. So there are a number of other countries.
For example.
Okay, let me go after this.
Okay, you go ahead. But I will give you more historically appropriate points in a second.
So basically, the reason why I don't like what they do is because it's based off of a religious theocracy. And so you can look at other religious theocracies in other countries that aren't being bombed, and the one commonality that they have is that they all suppress people's identity and they express their freedom of expression. And I think that any culture and any type of government that is derivative of a religion is fundamentally inferior. I think this is true with any book. It's true with Judaism. It's true with Christianity. It's true with Islam. It's true with Hinduism. I think it's true with anything. And I find it to be very problematic that we're using these books as a guideline for like how to make laws when these books actively encourage killing people for different types of identities. And obviously, like, I understand that there's like a huge spectrum of people that are part of any culture. There's people that are way more progressive, people that are way less progressive. But what I see is that I see countries that have laws that haven't been bombed, right? You look at like Saudi Arabia or like Dubai. A lot of these other countries still have the same types of expressions or same type of restrictions on the expression for LGBT. And I find that to be problematic and inferior. And I think that I want to make sure that this is very clear because, like, I don't want you to think that this is something that's like oh, the brown people over there are wrong. I would say the exact same thing for us, like the church, like Christianity. Like if you look at, for example, like Salem witch trials, it's disgusting. It's horrible. So all I'm saying is that I think that there is a standard that's being applied, and I don't really understand how that's defensible at all. I don't like, and that's what doesn't make sense to me. Is
It's
that
not.
and like okay,
It's
well go
not.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
But here is the problem.
Okay.
It's not defensible, but I think most people, including like the
Yeah.
gay Palestinians or queer Palestinians or queer Lebanese people,
Sure,
understand that there is no room for advocating for civil liberties in your own domestic policies when you are escaping bombing
So
campaigns.
I see your point,
So
but do you
this
see
is
my
the
point
reason.
that
This is the reason
go ahead.
why so many of these countries,
Mhm.
whether it be Iran, whether it be Afghanistan, whether it be Egypt, or many of these places that were far more liberal from Western standards, from the Western understanding of like social liberalism, multiple decades ago, before Western intervention, are no longer as socially liberal as they once were.
You're
Because
talking about like the 1917 Iran thing, basically?
not 1917, but yes,
Or it's
circa
1979,
1950.
excuse me. Yes,
Yes.
sorry.
And when you look at the history of these countries, and not to say that like I don't personally think that Saudi Arabia deserves to be annihilated for having a religious theocracy. I don't personally think Israel deserves to be annihilated for operating within like liberal confines, but still maintaining a religious theocracy that is baked into now their constitution.
Do you
Israel,
think that I support that?
no, I don't think you support that either.
Okay.
But wait, well, in terms of the Palestinians, I think the quote was that inferior cultures deserve to be wiped out.
Oh, I don't know about that. I feel like anytime that you're killing people based off of anything like that, I don't think that Israel or America or anybody has the right to come in and tell Palestine how to live and for them like what they're supposed to do. Right? I'm not trying to tell them what to do, but if you want me to accept their culture as being equivalent to ours, I won't do that.
Okay.
And I do think that it's worse.
Okay, but culture, you understand that culture changes throughout time, and it is directly a consequence of like how people or what people are experiencing. In the United States
I
of
think
America,
that we're evidence of that. We're evidence of that because like we're
yes.
much farther along.
So
Yeah, I
so
think a
do
lot
you
of places
think
are
do
a lot
you think like I don't think you would agree that bombing places makes them more tolerant to
Absolutely not.
yeah. Okay. And I don't think that
Absolutely
you
not.
I don't think that you think that like nuking America, for example, circa 2013 when gay marriage was
We're not going to bomb the gay into them. I understand that.
okay.
You're totally right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
in terms of some of your statements,
Yeah.
like not only I think you're wrong on the history of queer culture in Arab countries, in Muslim nations in general. I'll give you one example. The Ottoman Empire actually decriminalized homosexuality in the Tanzimat era. I think it was like 18th century. And before then, it was not even like a problem. It was never an issue. Far before Western nations ever actually far before Western nations ever actually decriminalized or made it legal to be gay. And this is oftentimes a not really mentioned aspect of the Muslim world or Muslim culture or the Arab history or the region's history at all. Most people don't know this, and it's like genuinely shocking to them. You might maybe even be shocked to find out that the Ottoman Empire, where Palestine was seen as a safe haven for Jews as they were escaping the Spanish Inquisition, for example, and many other pogroms that Jewish people experienced in, especially in Western and Eastern Europe. The Ottoman Empire in the MENA region, all the way that spans to Morocco, was seen as a safe haven and safe harbor for Jews, where they were allowed to coexist in far better conditions under Islamic rule, technically, that was far more
honestly,
tolerant.
I would go even farther than you are. I think that back then it wasn't just the fact that they were accepting of gay. I think that they were way more scientifically oriented. They were way more focused on learning and mathematics. I think that's evidently true. I don't think anybody would say the Ottoman Empire was shitty or anything like that. I think they were very progressive for their time. It's not even a question.
So
I totally agree with you.
But things have changed in the region since then.
They sure have.
So what do you think is the difference there? Like, what do you think has happened in the hundreds of years that have passed, that have gone by, or especially in the last 100 years? Why has the attitude overall in terms of governance changed so dynamically and so dramatically?
I think there's probably a bunch of different reasons for it, right? I mean, it's not like one reason, but I don't think that are we trying to imply that it's like American imperialism and interventionism that's caused this to happen? Is that kind of like
absolutely.
where you're going with
no,
this?
I am saying that. America not only directly armed and radicalized fundamentalists in the region, including but not limited to Afghanistan, for example, with the Mujahideen, because they were seen as like a fighting force that they could use against the communist adjacent Afghan government or the USSR inevitably when the USSR did invade. But also beyond that, the most nationalistic or the most militant fundamentalists were perceived in Iran, for example, as the true liberators that were not willing to fight against the Western-backed Shah regime, the Western-backed monarchy in Iran. So that's the reason why a lot of people, whether they agreed with it or not, ultimately on the social front doesn't really matter. They were like, these guys are going to protect us. These guys are actually fighting back against this ruthless rule of the Shah that was, falsely torturing people on a regular basis.
Okay, so
that's usually
if
how
your argument is that, well, how do you reconcile that with the fact that there are other countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, that don't have that history but still have the same laws?
Oh, that's a great example. Saudi Arabia is allowed to exist like that because they have a valuable resource that they are gladly and willingly coordinating with the Western powers on, in terms of OPEC plus. They have oil.
Doesn't that?
So did Iran, but Iranian oil was refined by British Petroleum, Mossadegh at the time. It was a social democrat, very progressive for the time as well, wanted to nationalize their own extraction industries. And this was seen as a massive slight and it caused massive harm to the profit margins of British Petroleum and the American intelligence and Western intelligence cooperated to overthrow Mossadegh very openly and very clearly. They implemented the Shah regime. He was brutal. He was a brutal autocrat. He was a monarch. People hated him. And at the end of the day, it was the Islamic Revolution and the fundamentalist forces that were the most successful in terms of fighting back against the Shah. That's the reason why they overtook the country and have been dominating the nation ever since. There are plenty of gay and trans people. By the way, Iran is actually weirdly very pro-trans, but I'm sure that you probably didn't know that. They're very homophobic, but they are very pro-trans. A lot of cultures are actually very pro-trans, way more than the United States of America. Maybe to a fault at times, like Iran, when they do forcible gender
I mean, you look at like Native American culture, I think it's extremely popular.
Yeah.
Norse culture, I mean, you could say the same thing about Loki, right? It's like the idea of being trans is like super, super, super old, like Shiva, right? Another good example. So I
Yes.
think that that's
Yes. There's
true.
a concept of third
Yeah,
gender in India,
sure.
Pakistan, and many other places as well. So,
Yeah.
but that's besides the point. So
Mhm.
what I'm trying to say is we cannot exist outside of the material condition that we are subjected to. If you are living under a ruthless, corrupt autocratic rule, and there's a group of people that say, I'm going to, fight back against this ruthless autocratic rule that is like Western power backed, then people will be on board with that. They're going to be like, oh, this is great. I love this revolution. I'm on
I
board.
Okay, so I can go even farther than that. I totally understand why groups like ISIS happen. Like if you look at people from ISIS, these are people that are like 20 years old. They've lived their entire life being occupied by a foreign power.
Okay,
I
but
think that
there
I
is a
think we're
difference
doing
between
a horrible
ISIS
thing.
and Iran,
Sure.
though. Like, I hope you
No,
understand that, right? And just like there's a difference between
of
ISIS
course.
and Hamas and all these other like
I'm
other
just giving
other.
you an example. I'm giving you
Okay,
an example of like, so I think extremist groups are created. So you got a lot of heat, you got a lot of hate. One of your most popular, biggest hits was that America deserved 9/11. Remember that?
yes.
Bad day, bad day. But what you meant to say is that American interventionism inadvertently caused this to happen.
No,
Am I right?
directly, not even inadvertently. Is a concept that
Okay.
historians
So
call blowback.
I totally agree with you about that. I completely agree with you. I think that you're right. I defended that.
Yeah.
So my perspective is that I don't think that we can blame, like, I don't see the logic that all of these other countries that are like, from the West, right, that are like much more progressive are somehow intervening and making this like these other countries in the Middle East hate gay people and like want to kill gay people. And I don't see how like
Wait, you don't
pushing
agree with
against
that? You're
uh
saying
no, I don't. I don't really see how they're congruent.
so?
I don't see like
Why
no,
do you
I
think
don't.
that? So why do you think that historically they didn't hate gay people, but now they do? Like, don't you
I'm not
don't
sure.
you recognize that like culture changes? You said that you understand that like the Ottoman Empire
Sure.
was more progressive in
But
comparison to
like
its European counterparts in terms of like the way that they view gay people, even or homosexuality in general.
I think that
Um,
we can come to the agreement and like we can talk about historically all you want, right? I think that in some cases like that's true. In a lot of cases, like the way that this is perceived around the world, like Romans looked at it differently, Greeks looked at it differently. Everybody's looked at it differently. But I'm talking about what's happening today. And if I'm looking at
yeah,
those
but
cultures today, those are cultures that are oppressing people based off of their identity. And at a
well,
certain point,
right
when
now,
it,
the Palestinians don't have any structural governance to be able to do that, regardless. So there is no like gay oppression happening in Gaza, because the only oppression that's happening in Gaza is that Israel's lighting them on fire with regular frequency. Um,
and we're paying for it.
yes. So um, in terms of like Islamist
Yeah.
fundamentalism, right?
Yeah.
In terms of Islamist fundamentalism, or
Mhm.
the way that like you perceive Palestinians as viewing gay people,
Yeah.
there has never been an opportunity for for Palestinian people to engage in queer liberation, because in the hierarchy of needs, the number one need for them is to stop Israel from killing them, is to stop Israel from dominating them
Mhm.
since 1948, and even
Right.
before then as well. But after Israel was formed in 1948, that has been the game for the most part. They have never had an opportunity to even think about queer liberation. If your house is on fire, you're not going to be spending a whole lot of time thinking about the color of your curtains,
Mhm.
right? And that's what this is. Much larger there's a much larger problem at hand. And this is precisely the reason why a lot of people actually never fully comprehend this. But a lot of leftists in the Western world do understand that intersectionality, And regardless of like the perceived queer phobia from Palestinians and Palestinian governance, they still, of course, offer solidarity. I said this earlier, and I think it's a take bear repeating. I'm in favor of Medicare for all and universal social safety nets in the United States of America unconditionally. I do not believe in refusing to offer, for example, any sort of health care to a person because they're a Nazi even, right? That's an extreme case. And I think that they deserve health care.
I agree with you, and I would even go farther than that. I think that if somebody's an illegal immigrant, I don't think that we should ever I think it's disgusting to tell a doctor or tell a healthcare provider to let somebody die or to let them bleed out or something like that just because of that. I completely agree with you. I had to pay my taxes recently. I'm sure you're probably about in the same place. It was 7 figures. And so I have no problem with that.
I live in California. It's pretty significant.
You got to bet. Yeah. It's
but I don't care.
Good.
I don't mind that.
I don't either. I used to be paying for people used to pay for my food stamps. Now I'm paying for somebody else's. And if they raise my taxes to pay for Medicare for all, I would be happy and I would vote for that.
So if you understand that, right?
Sure.
So you recognize that. Would you say that like a religious enclave in Alabama, for example, deserves to be wiped out for their understanding of like gay people? Like a white religious enclave in Alabama?
Absolutely not. I don't think that they deserve to be wiped out, but I would not advocate for them. I would not look at that group and say, this is a group of people that I support.
So you can understand where the confusion comes from when you
and I can
said that
see
about
that.
Palestinians,
that's
right?
why I wanted to. Yeah, sure, right, sure, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, right? Because I think that you and we had a conversation about this before. And I can very much easily empathize with Palestinians. Of course I can. But I don't think that it's entirely true that Palestine, didn't Palestine support Hitler?
No.
Pretty sure they did.
No.
The mayor of Palestine supported Hitler.
What you're talking about is the British colonial British colonial occupation put forward a leader. Oftentimes in colonies, when you engage in like colonial actions, like and British Mandate Palestine was obviously a colony of the English, they will appoint a person into a position of power that is more acceptable to British needs and desires in the region to dominate the people. History is riddled with examples such as this one. The Palestinian Grand Mufti was a singular person who went and linked up with Adolf Hitler and thought that he could coordinate with Adolf Hitler in terms of like ridding Palestine of the Jews. Having said that, however, 11,000
and that sounds pretty bad.
It does. When you realize that one, there were also Jewish militias, early Zionist militias that also sought out Adolf Hitler's help and tried to coordinate with Adolf Hitler. You understand that this has no bearing on an entire people and what their actual attitudes were. Not only that, but also 11,000 Palestinians actually fought alongside the Allied forces against Adolf Hitler. So Palestinians, by far greater numbers, actually fought against Adolf Hitler than the one British occupation guy that actually linked up with Adolf Hitler. It's actually a common historic Holocaust revisionist talking point that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu once famously utilized as well, where he falsely claimed that Adolf Hitler did not want to kill the Jews until he talked to the Palestinian Grand Mufti, who gave him the idea of killing the Jews and doing the final solution. This was such a gross historical revisionist talking point that obviously the entirety of Israeli society actually criticized Benjamin Netanyahu for saying such a ridiculous...
But he did want to get rid of the Jews, though, right?
Yeah, but it's a singular person that has no bearing on real Palestinian existence, especially when much larger numbers of Palestinians fought alongside the Allied forces, right?
I think that it definitely does matter if a figurehead of a country is supporting Hitler.
It's not a figurehead of a country, though. It's the figurehead. It's an appointed person
and
that has no bearing. And for example,
don't you feel like it's a bit unfair for you to attribute every instance of bigotry and bad behavior to being the West's fault?
No, I
At
think I
what
have a
point
very
are
realistic and materialistic analysis of these sorts of things, where I think that people don't have time to fight for gay liberation when, like I said, they're too busy trying to literally rebuild their homes after it's bombed, especially by a force that, you know, doesn't have like automatic heat-seeking missiles that avoid gay people. You know what I mean? They're killing gay people and trans people in Gaza every fucking day. Like, there is no, like, gay liberation is not a real conversation here. It's just a mere talking point that a lot of people who defend Israel, not saying you do, but a lot of people who defend Israel try to repackage Israel's violence and contextualize it and make it seem more appropriate to an American audience that is sometimes pro-gay and pro-queer. It rarely ever works. A lot of queer people still don't give a shit. They're like, I don't care. Just stop killing these people is their attitude. So that's it. That's the reality of the matter, is that once Palestine is liberated, then they can have this conversation internally. But right now, Western forces are allowing the death and destruction of this people to continue.
What do you think the odds are that after this stops happening, that the Palestinians are going to get together and say that it's okay to be gay?
I don't know, because I can't even imagine a world where this death and destruction isn't constant. But I would say that just like in the United States of America, you know, there people inevitably evolved, inevitably fought back, and
what do you think? I've actually got a really good question.
An environment for queer liberation, even though to this day there are still a shit ton of problems that especially trans people experience on a regular basis.
Oh, I mean, it to me, I'm sure you're on Twitter probably more than I am.
I'm not.
And so, really?
Yeah, I deleted it off my phone. I rarely go on it unless I'm live.
Nick did the same thing. That's crazy. Wow. Okay. Well, okay. I'm on Twitter a lot. How much more racist do you think that it's gotten, and like homophobic do you think it's gotten in the last like 2 years? I think it's like 500x, right?
Yes.
Like it's insane. It's crazy, and I think that it's just it just keeps getting worse too. And I'm curious, like, kind of what your viewpoint is, because we're talking about like kind of how like these different cultures are accepting people, and like now, what do you think about like Saudi Arabia and like the way that they're like, I guess, effectively sports washing things? I think that's the term that's being used a lot, right, with like esports, etc. Like, what's your take on that?
I think that Saudi Arabia is also a religious theocracy that is simply trying to moderate their viewpoint in an effort to become more accepted by Western culture and bring in Western capital into the country. Ultimately, if they did become a queer safe haven, for example, overnight, there's still plenty of issues in Saudi society in terms of utilizing slave labor, in terms of death and destruction that befalls like indigenous populations in areas where they want to do building projects, and beyond that, there is the whole genocide in Yemen. A lot of these things can be solved inevitably, and there were some initiative from China that brought Iran and Saudi Arabia to the table to stop the destruction of Yemen, for example. That was relatively successful pre-October 7. But like, there are a shit ton of problems in Saudi Arabia still. Having said
just
that,
recently they just let women drive.
Yes,
very recently. Yeah,
yes.
no,
a lot of the things,
I'm fully aware
of the
that.
things that people who use this kind of sentiment against Palestinians oftentimes will overlook Saudi Arabia or other Gulf states that have the exact same rules and restrictions. But once again, this is more so about allowing right-wing sentiment to fester and dominate a society. There are plenty of members in the Israeli Knesset, for example, that also don't want women to learn how to fucking read and write.
It's so bad. Like, I absolutely, you're completely right.
And there are plenty of people in America who feel similar ways as well.
I've been hearing a lot of bad things about women being able to vote.
Yes, some
Yeah.
of those people gain more prominence in society as society becomes. some of these people end up gaining more prominence in society, and slowly but surely they try to reorient society to their own desires. That's the reason
True.
why a lot of people fight back against this sort of thing. Okay, that's the reason
Mhm.
why a lot of people fight back. Gay people, queer people, people who are aligned with them fight back against this sort of sentiment in an effort to make sure that it never turns into a society that does this kind of thing to gay people, queer people in general. So,
Does it again? Well, we used to do it for a long time. I mean, gay marriage being legal is very, very recent.
yes. And it's
No,
already,
I totally support that.
yeah. So, my point is,
Yeah.
we've never given the opportunity to many of these countries in the MENA region uh, to be able to have the freedom to continue developing and have their own civil liberties and have their own fight for civil liberties. And we will never be able to see what it would look like if they were given the opportunity without our intervention. We can only look to the past where that intervention wasn't as severe and point to a time when they were relatively open minded, especially in comparison to their European counterparts. But the way that we see what they do, okay, is never translated to the way that we operate here in the United States of America.
How do
I
you
think
figure
that
that?
dynamic. I think that dynamic stems from dehumanization of Arab people in general. That is unfortunately all too commonplace in Western media and in Western society.
I think it happens a lot. I mean, like, and obviously, like after 9/11, I mean, I've, have a number of Arab friends and they've told me it was a very, very bad time. So I think that you're absolutely right about that. And it is problematic. I don't
Okay.
really think that I don't think that it's fair to say that, like, of course, like all people that are Arabs, and also like, really, it's not about being an Arab. It's about having a religious theocracy that enables you to dehumanize other people.
Yeah,
Because you want to talk
Palestinians
about
don't have a theocracy, by
dehumanization.
the way, just so you understand. Like they don't have anything. They don't have any sort of like real valid form of governance at all. They have never been allowed to have a real valid form of governance or any sort of autonomy or any sort of sovereignty, at least, especially since
Mhm.
1948.
Sure. But like in all of the other places in the same area, pretty much all of them that are doing their own governance
Hmm.
come to the same conclusion about gay people.
Yeah.
They pretty much, yeah,
So,
they do.
so you, okay. So this is really interesting that you're saying this because
Yeah.
you recognize that like a lot of those other Gulf states are in alignment with the United States of America and are allowed to operate in whichever ways they see fit, including but not limited to helping Israel, right? They get F-16s and fleets of American planes, and they get security contracts for their consistent maintenance of American interests in the region.
Do you think I support that?
I don't.
I
I'm
don't.
not even. I'm not
I
even
don't.
saying if you
I
support it or not.
so
I'm
so
simply
here's the
stating that
thing.
like
Oh, go ahead.
monopolizing an entire region of people and assuming that they all are operating on the same boundaries is incorrect. It would be
Of
akin
course,
to
there's always going to be people that are like that. But I also think that they do the same thing to gay people. In the same way that, like, you're looking at everybody and they actually will do it. It doesn't matter whether a gay person is a good person or not. If they're gay in that culture, they can lose their life, they can go to jail, they'll have their
okay.
life completely ruined.
Okay,
Uh,
you understand that there's a difference between a sovereign nation state that has been a monarchy that America has like funded
mhm.
and allowed to foster with whatever kind of autonomy, sometimes impunity, as a matter of fact, versus like the Palestinian population, though, right?
I think that definitely there's a big difference, but what I'm saying is that I don't think
Okay,
that difference has been manifested. Like, the difference is that when you have a culture that is derivative off of a religion that I think is oppressive and it hasn't been modernized, you have people that are using it as a tool to oppress other people. I do genuinely think that cultures that are built off of religions like that are inferior. And I
okay,
think that we've worked really hard to get away from that. and that work isn't done yet. I think it's still going on to this day.
Okay.
And it's disappointing for me because I've seen things go backwards a lot. I think in the
Mm-hmm.
last 2 years, they've gone backwards in a tremendous way. You see it on social media. I saw like there was some bullshit thing about how 21% of Gen Z think Hitler had some good ideas. That's very concerning for me. It's extremely
Mm-hmm.
concerning.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lack of education in
It
in
is,
America.
among
It's
other
really
things.
bad. But once
Yeah.
again, like what you are, what you're what you're doing is something that I see a lot, which is
Okay.
a conflation of conservatism and
Mhm.
reactionary ideals with members of an entire religion. So in the United States of America, right, you have really, really freakish religious guys, right? You have people who want basically the same governance that the Taliban has over Afghanistan, but in the United States of America. Like there are people like that.
I think they've got a lot in common.
Yeah.
They do. I think it's 9 out of
But
10.
then in the United States of America, I'm sure you know plenty of religious people who are very tolerant, even if not literally pro-gay and pro-trans. Even there are non-denominational Christian
We've
churches, for
yeah,
example, that
we've
are
seen a lot of that. And I would apply I wanna make sure that, like, because I think a lot of times in conversations like this, there becomes, like, this othering of, like Arabs or, like, Islam. I don't really see that as an othering. I think that there's a lot of overlap between Christianity and Islam, right?
okay.
Especially in terms of, like, laws, etcetera, and things to believe. And I think that I would view a Christian, like one of these like super like religious zealot Christian people, I would view them trying to push that on other people as the same type of basically inferior culture. I think that it is inferior. That's why
Y-
we fought for years and years and years to get rid of it.
Okay. So yeah, obviously chattel slavery was justified by Christianity, and chattel slavery was abolished with liberation theology, which is also Christianity. So Christianity, religion, played a formative role in both sides of chattel slavery, both in the justification and maintenance of it, but also played a formative role in the abolition of it. Right.
That's true,
So
but I want to make
so
sure that we're drawing a distinction real quick between following a religion and then having a government that is a religious theocracy
yeah.
that bases its laws off of that religion. I think that most people that are of any religion just want to be able to get along. I
Okay.
think that's very much true.
So
But the problem is that if you have a government that is based off of that religion, I can't think of a single government that's based off of a religion that isn't bad.
well, I mean, Americans are the American Republican Party is desperately trying to bring that back as best as they can, but I
They're
think
trying to
you
make them they've made it legal to teach it's mandatory now to teach the Bible in Oklahoma.
yes. So
You saw
so
that. Yeah.
yeah, I did. So you understand that those are people, some of which are genuine like religious zealots, and others who are simply utilizing religion as a galvanizing factor to be like, see, I'm a religious person, right? Like
Oh, I think
people
that
have
we know
different
somebody like that.
aspirations. People have different motivations for why
Yeah.
they advocate for certain things. Okay. So that
I
very
think
same
that that's
principle,
very common that
yeah,
people use religion as a tool to like kind of enable that type of behavior.
great. So
Sure.
so herein lies a problem.
Mhm.
That very same principle exists in the Muslim world, which is endlessly diverse, and there are it's the fastest growing religion. It is,
It
I
is.
think it might have actually overtaken Christianity in terms of numbers.
I think it's
And
1.6 billion now. That's
and
the number
yes,
I last
and
heard.
and
Yeah.
religious governance differs from country to country. I'm Turkish. I come from a country that is nowhere near as fundamentalist. It's supposed to be secular.
Mhm.
Obviously, Recep Tayyip Erdogan is very similar to Donald Trump in terms of in terms of how he utilized Islam to make himself to give himself a more prominent role in Turkish society. Was able to both bastardize religion and also simultaneously use it for social repression, social oppression, and cultural repression in general. So I personally understand like I've it withstood the direct consequences of that, of a society being redesigned. And And perhaps that is the reason why I know that there's a difference between simply monolithizing an entire religion versus people who are championing religion, Islam in this case, to meet their own authoritarian governance demands. And that's simply what it is. A lot of people don't like the way that their government operates. There are gay Muslims, there are queer Muslims, there are queer trans people. They have unfortunately not had any breathing room to be able to advocate for civil rights in many parts of this region because they have been consistently pushed back against, and also don't have any fucking time or space to be able to do such a thing when they're under direct occupation. That's the issue.
But would you come to the same conclusion that basing decisions off of that religion and making laws based off of that religion is a bad thing?
Yeah, of course. I don't. What do you mean?
Okay.
I don't agree in theocracy at all.
Awesome. But wouldn't that mean that it would be inferior? Or,
no, I wouldn't say that any culture is inferior to one another. I would, however, say that especially as it pertains to Palestinians, the reason why I don't think it's inferior over the one another is that inferiority is a very dangerous and treacherous language to utilize, especially when there are hundreds of thousands of dead and wounded people that are in the crosshairs of Israeli violence.
I think that it works. If this is a semantics issue, and if like me saying inferior, if you think that that's dehumanizing or problematic, then I don't necessarily completely agree, but I can see where you're coming from.
Well,
I would say worse, or you could replace that with any other word that is just like not as good as.
Yeah.
But of course that doesn't represent
But even
the
then,
people,
it doesn't matter because then
person.
there's something that's better, right? The problem is American culture or like American actions are not necessarily better. That's my point.
They
on
are.
The basis of like on the basis
it's not
of,
even a question. If you have a country and a culture that allows somebody to get killed for their sexual orientation, that is a worse culture than a culture that doesn't.
I think
there's no other way to look at it.
There's something. So here's the thing. There's something that we do in the United States of America, or in the Western world especially, that creates this veneer, this aesthetic that we are somehow morally more progressive and more superior than other countries. I'll give you an example of I can talk about like gay rights in general, but beyond gay rights, one thing that I could talk about especially is for example, slavery, right?
Sure.
We often talk about gulags and slave labor being done in the USSR, in the Orient, like all the way over there, and how damaging that is. Whereas like
being used now in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
whereas slavery is literally codified in the American Constitution under the 13th Amendment. It's just that slavery is appropriate as a mechanism of punishment for those who have done crimes. Another great example of this is bribery, right? We often look at like the barbaric nature of like Pakistani society or Indian society where bribery thrives.
Sure.
There's so much corruption. It's bribery. We have codified bribery under
lobbying?
Under legal terms. Exactly.
Right.
Lobbying.
Okay. So I see your point of view, but I don't agree with you about the slavery point. They used to take black people's teeth out of their mouths so they would give them to white people. We don't do that even to prisoners.
No, I know, but it's still but slavery is still an inhumane practice, right? Like you understand that, you agree with that.
I do, but I'm saying that the level and the severity of like the American like transatlantic slave trade is like several measures of worse than the way that prisoners are treated here.
Of course. No, chattel slavery is a unique evil, and every single historian will agree with you on that front, that many cultures have practiced slavery throughout time, none of which as uniquely evil as chattel slavery, because there is obviously a like scientific racial aspect to it in terms of like
Like
indentured
eugenics and
servitude.
stuff?
Indentured servitude, for
Yeah.
example, did not mean that like your next of kin was also enslaved in a similar fashion. Whereas chattel slavery is different because if you're black, that means you are inhumane. It means you're inferior. And the point I was going to make is that,
Sure.
ironically enough, whether you recognize it or not, the exact same arguments and sentiments were expressed towards black people in during chattel slavery in an effort to justify their continued enslavement, that they were inferior.
Can you
that they
elaborate
were,
on that? I'm not
Yeah.
sure what you mean by that.
black people were perceived in an effort to continue in American culture, in American society, in the Western world, in an effort to continue the dominance of black people, in an effort to continue
Right.
their subjugation. The Americans, or at least like people in positions of power, were like, we need a way to make this appropriate, to make this justifiable, to make this permissible.
Oh,
Because,
I mean, like,
because
well,
otherwise, if people
it's
start recognizing that these are human beings and not simply fucking capital, not simply, animals or something even worse than animal, then they're gonna start feeling bad, and people
well,
are
this
gonna
isn't
fuck up
it
the
isn't
bag.
new, right? It's not new. It wasn't the succession of kings back in the day. It was the divine succession of kings.
No,
I
yes,
totally,
yes and no, yes and no. So the reason why I'm saying this, because we both
well, you're
recognize
saying
the
that there's
uniqueness
a
of chattel
religious
slavery.
you're saying that there is a religious justification that was created so it could be justified that you could do this.
No,
I
I'm not even talking about the religious justification. No, I'm talking about
just like a moral one.
scientific justification.
Like eugenics.
Yes, eugenics,
Oh,
which is
sure.
now
Yeah.
seen as a
Pseudoscience.
false science, as pseudoscience that was specifically created and designed in an effort to look at this racialized form of violence and justify it. And in that process at the time, or rather, the reason why they went to that justification was because, if they were to do this on religious boundaries or on ethnic boundaries, as they had done previously in previous societies, whether it be like the Romans or the Greeks or any other form of like indentured servitude that was practiced in other cultures and other civilizations, you could not engage in the continued dominance of black people that way, because what if they become Christian, right? Or when you bring black people here, they learn the culture, they can they can integrate into society inevitably. So in order to create this like continued dominance, they sought out the scientific, in air quotes, the pseudoscientific understanding of black inferiority, African inferiority. Their culture is barbaric.
I think, are you trying to draw a parallel between like the eugenics argument for like subjugating black people and my argument for saying that like the like a religious theocracy is inferior? Is that kind of like where you're going?
Where I'm going is that in order for Western cultures, in order for Western nations to continue their dominance over other nation states, there is a direct through line of creating an air of inferiority while simultaneously destabilizing these places in an effort to maintain their underdeveloped status, which oftentimes will result in people behaving in more violent manners.
If you fuck with people, they're not going to like it.
Yes.
I agree with you. I think that's very true. Absolutely. I don't really think that there's really much of a disagreement there. I think that like absolutely that's what's happened. But if I'm looking at it from like my point of view, I do think that like the culture that we have is a better culture. I don't think that you can compare it to eugenics. I don't think you can say like, for example, like with eugenics where they're like comparing like shapes of somebody's skull or something like that versus like whether somebody is allowed to be gay or not without being prosecuted or killed. I don't really think that these two things are equivalent. I think that one of them is absolutely a lot worse.
No,
it's much more.
I'm simply mentioning the rhetoric that is utilized in this process. Like one of the examples is like the indigenous population, right? which is
Like Native Americans?
yes, which is ironic
Sure.
that we're having this conversation today. A
Columbus
lot of
Day.
the early justifications of settler colonial violence was met with, well, the natives are barbaric. The indigenous population is killing one another. They're practicing bloodletting. They're cannibals and whatnot. Some of which was not
Yeah.
true at all, and others that might have been true. Now,
Well, there's a lot of it that was true. I mean, they
Now-
did some crazy shit down there.
so ultimately, it still does not justify the inhumane and horrific practice of full-scale genocide, which is infinitely more barbaric than anything that you could basically say about the indigenous population, right?
I would say to an extent, yeah. Like if you want to talk about like how the Spanish treated them, yeah, it was really bad.
Okay, so it's
Sure.
a far greater evil, right? Like
Right.
instead of um, fostering a non-hostile relationship with the indigenous population and collaborating with them, instead of doing that, full-scale domination and ethnic cleansing was the far worse evil in that process, right? Because human beings are still human beings at the end of the day. You can like reason with them, you can talk to them. There is no greater evil in terms of like evil Olympics. Like genocide is up there. It's the worst thing you can do to a entire group of people.
You're totally right. I completely agree with you because like, yeah, you can't talk to them or anything like that. But what I'm saying is that I think that those people were killing others of them all the time. Like they were doing that too. This is, I mean, we're doing an evil tier list, right?
Yeah.
And so like you're saying that this one is kind of a little bit worse than the others.
No,
And I
not a
think that
little bit. No. I think far worse.
Okay.
Far more
I mean,
damaging.
that's
far more
fine.
damaging historically and throughout time. Like, I guess my argument is like, I
Yeah.
don't care if, like, for example, Jewish people in the Holocaust, like if they were homophobic, for example, like I don't think that would justify the Holocaust.
No.
You agree
Obviously
with that,
not.
right? Okay.
Yeah, of course not.
Then what your statements about Palestinian culture and the reason why a lot of people on Twitter are mad at you now is a similar sentiment being expressed, whether it was inadvertent or not, that their inferior culture is being wiped out, and you don't care if an inferior culture is being wiped out. Like that's
I'm not going to support a culture that demonizes and kills people for their identity. I'm never going to support a culture that does that. It doesn't matter whether it's Christian, Islamic, or anything atheist. Any time that a culture is killing people for their identity, that culture is evil, and they are committing an act of evil. It's completely indefensible.
Well, I think there are some issues with that sentiment, especially when you compare, for example, what the American government did in World War II. We support the Allied forces. We root for easy company, as my friend Felix Biederman always says, regardless of how America was segregated at the time, an incredibly unfair and inhumane practice, right? Americans were not exactly woke on gay people at the time. Americans were not exactly woke on black people at the time. There were horrifying things that we did to black soldiers in the aftermath of World War II, as a matter of fact.
And we've gotten a lot better since then.
But hold on. But ultimately, right, we still celebrate the Allied forces and their accomplishments in World War II, right? In defeating Adolf Hitler and liberating these concentration camps. The problem is, in terms of like the analysis, in terms of people resisting against like Israeli occupation, a similar dynamic exists. These are guys who I don't agree with in terms of their own domestic affairs, in terms of the way that they govern themselves. But the problem is they don't have, like, there is no opportunity for normal Palestinian civilians to go out and take it to the streets and like fight back against their own governments to be able to get to that point in terms of civil liberties for queer people. They've never had that opportunity. So I see it in the same exact way. Like, I ride for easy company, And I think that I am not going to sit here and criticize people resisting against the Israeli apartheid for that same exact reason, because it's a far greater evil than anything that people could potentially do. Genocide is the thing. It's the worst possible thing you can do to an entire population.
But they would be doing the genocide to people based off of their identity.
No, you can't imagine that, is what I'm saying. You can't and you can't point to Saudi Arabia as a reason for why you think they would, especially when historically they haven't. And beyond that, there's never been an opportunity for them to be liberated so they could even fight back against so that normal Palestinians could fight back against, like, you know, whatever kind of religious oppression that might come afterwards.
So your perspective is that you think that if Israel wasn't doing this, that Palestine would, like, basically progress through these social issues in the same way that we have.
I think all people, when they no longer are subjects of colonial oppression, will inevitably come to that recognition, just like Americans did, where there is more breathing room, where there's more of an opportunity for people to fight back, in that, like, work their way through those hierarchical needs. And yes, queer liberation is a part of that. Feminism is a part of that. Feminist movements are a part of that, and that's how societies are allowed to evolve and you know, become a different version of what they once were. The problem is there's never been an opportunity for them. Now, having said that, just like I talked about, you know, Easy Company and the Allied forces during World War II, like, you root for them against Adolf Hitler, right? Because Adolf Hitler was doing a genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the same principle here for the Palestinian liberation, is that regardless of what their attitude is, regardless of what their cultural attitude might be, the governance specifically, because Hamas in and of itself is an Islamist fundamentalist organization that has evolved throughout the years. But having said that, it is still, you know, they're definitely guys who maybe I don't see the world in the same ways with, and don't agree with their form of, like, internal governance. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, because their primary
bad.
What?
Yeah, it's pretty bad though.
Yeah,
I mean, the way that,
and the reason why I don't spend a lot of time and emphasis on that is because their primary role for existence in general, as Palestinian statehood has evolved, or the Palestinian emancipation movement has evolved over the course of 76 years, they have become the only party that is ready to resist against the Israeli settler colonial occupation. So that's my analysis there. It's that it's not going to stop. Palestinian people are going to continue to be mercilessly and ruthlessly dominated by the Israeli apartheid, as they have historically. And I'm not going to fault and find ways in which, like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the disagreements that I have with either their tactics or even the way that they would potentially govern themselves, because I think it bears no basis in the grander scheme of things.
I do criticize the tactics, especially, like, I mean, that was the October 7th thing. I mean, a lot of random civilians and people that weren't involved were getting killed. It's evil when they do it, and it's evil when Israel does it.
Yeah. But again,
I think that was a terrible
okay. That's a
thing.
great. That's it. You made a great statement. I have also condemned the death and destruction of civilians. Now, but listen. Going back to the Nat Turner Rebellion, or the Haitian Revolution, or the Algerian Revolution, or the struggle against the apartheid in South Africa, history is riddled with violent actions that move the needle in terms of liberation. But when all is said and done, you don't think about the practice of putting a fucking tire around collaborators in apartheid South Africa and lighting them on fire. You think about how gross and inhumane the practice of the maintenance of the apartheid was. Because if you spent a whole lot of time on what the tactics of the liberation were, it would almost come across as a justification, right? And that's my
I
point.
don't. Okay. So you think like, and I could see where somebody would think that. Sure, I could see where somebody would come from that perspective. I don't really think that it's justified at all. I don't think that we should be fucking with them. I don't think we should be funding Israel. I think it's disgusting. It's a waste of everybody's money. Like you were talking about universal health care earlier. I think it'd be a lot easier for us to do that if we weren't shipping a bunch of bombs and resources overseas to kill random people. I totally agree with you. But I think that I very much think that it's wishful thinking that the moment that Israel stops attacking Palestine or Palestine has some degree of independence, queer liberation is going to begin. I think that that will only happen in the situation where a religious theocracy no longer exists in any capacity.
Well, for again, religious theocracy has never existed in Palestine regardless. They've never had a form of governance, let alone a religious theocracy, especially because
do you,
like
do you think they're not making decisions based off of religion over there?
yeah, there is no religious theocracy at all. They're not like following the rule of Islam or anything like that, or whatever your understanding of a religious theocracy is. No, there are religious fundamentalists within the governance structure, but once again, it bears no. It's not a part of the decision making structure.
So where do
at
you think
all.
they
It is
got
not a
the
significant aspect of their. It's not a significant aspect of their day to day existence because
where do you
they're
think they
being.
got the idea to kill gay people then, or to put them in jail? Where did that idea come from? If it wasn't
What do,
from religion?
what do you mean?
Well,
I
like
mean,
so,
where,
yeah,
it's
like where would it have come from?
it is ultimately irrelevant in the grand scheme of things because they are still under a permanent occupation. That's my
But it did
point.
come from. My point is that it came from a religion.
Okay, religious theocracy is a religious. Okay, it's conservatism that you're criticizing, not specifically religious theocracy would be the final stage of conservatism in general. But what you're not recognizing in this process is that Palestinian civil governance, in terms of like their mistreatment of gay people or anything like that, is totally and utterly irrelevant, especially when the only thing that we are doing in terms of our intervention there is to literally galvanize people with some more fundamentalist, some more reactionary perspectives by killing every single person.
True.
So if
I
your
completely agree
goal,
with you.
if your goal is to allow, if your goal is to I guess abolish homophobia, destroy queerphobia in general, you can't keep bombing these places. You need to allow these societies to redevelop, and then civil liberation will come. Just like in the United States of America, some form of that has existed, some form of that occurred because a lot of gay people and their allies fought long and hard, and inevitably in 2013 we allowed gay marriage to happen legally.
Right?
Even though there's always going to be a constant push and pull, there are still plenty of people who are trying to take that back as well. But my solution for that is never to bomb and kill and massacre people who have these opinions.
I don't think that that's the right option either, but I'm not going to support a culture of people where that is the default. And I don't think that it's as simple as saying that because we're bombing them and because this Maslow's hierarchy of needs is happening, that this is the outcome. They like, I don't really see how it's congruent that
you can see how it's inconsistent though, right? Because like you're saying that you don't want to bomb like a religious enclave, a white religious enclave in Alabama.
I don't
but you won't
bomb
support
Israel.
them. But if they were being bombed, I don't think you would sit idly by. You say this is fucking completely inappropriate. You wouldn't be like, well, they're inferior in terms of their culture, so they kind of, you can make up your mind on whether they deserve it or not. But I don't remember the exact quote you said, but like I'm pretty sure it was something along the lines of like, they're gonna get wiped out, and because they're inferior, that's fine. So if you view your fellow American citizens as human beings, the Palestinians are no different in that regard.
I think it's definitely different if you're talking about people that are from your country or not. Absolutely, it's different.
Wait, why?
Well, because they're part of your country, they're part of your culture. You're accountable to them in a completely different way. Like, of course, I'm going to feel more accountability and I'm going to care more about somebody who lives in my country than somebody that's across the world. Of course, I would think that. It's not even a
Wait,
question.
no, they're not. Wait, but the underlying fundamentals here is that they're human beings with
Sure.
dreams and different opinions, or maybe even the same opinions and same exhibiting the same stages of life that you're exhibiting, and therefore all life must be cherished, and their lives are should be no different in your analysis. If we're looking at like right and wrong, their lives are no different, even if they disagree fundamentally with you culturally. They don't deserve to be bombed.
No. I don't want to have them bombed. Like, that's why I don't want to support Israel. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't want to support this. I
Okay,
don't
but
want to have
Israel is
anything to
still
do with it. I
bombing
don't.
them, and
Sure.
when you say one culture is inferior in the process of them being wiped out, saying that you're okay with them being wiped out and not saying that you support them makes it feel like you're fine with the way that things are unfolding in
I
the
don't
area.
want to involve. I don't want to involve and entangle the country in another issue like that. I don't want to be involved with it one way or another. And no, I don't think that if they stopped getting bombed, they would just start being accepting of these other people with these
Well,
different
you
identities.
you don't know because we've never
We do
experienced
know
that.
because there's other countries that are part of that same region that
Wait,
have the same laws, like Saudi Arabia or
but
Qatar.
they're not the same people. You do understand that, right? Like even culturally speaking.
They're coming from the same culture and they're coming from the same religion.
No, that Asmongold.
Do you
I
really
don't know
think
how to
that they're not
describe this to you. Well, one, because
okay,
you're talking to
okay.
someone who is from that culture and from that region, who is like of a Muslim background, comes from a 98% Muslim country. So, and you know what my fucking opinion is in general. You know what my worldview is. So I think you
I
understand that
don't see
there is
that
a
doesn't
genuine
that's what doesn't
diversity of thought there.
yes,
Monolithizing an entire region of
you
people
are
is literally
allowed that
just.
you're allowed that diversity of thought because you're not there.
No, that's not true. There are plenty of Turkish people who fight back against the Turkish government currently, and Turkey was significantly more secular, many, many years ago before the Erdogan regime came through and utilized religion as a bastardized version of religion as a way to invoke social repression. Turkey is still far more modernized and far more tolerant than some of these counterparts that you're talking about. But ultimately, there is no like singular attitude that every single person from this region has. Just like there is no singular attitude in the United States of America. That's why I gave you the example of like Christian fundamentalists living in a white enclave in Alabama
Mhm.
versus fundamentalists that exist in the region. They are not like there is no unified monolithic understanding within the Muslim world. That is not the case at all. And there have been plenty of initiatives to fight against social repression in these countries. It's just that it is virtually impossible to successfully implement these sorts of strategies when you're too busy worrying about like if America is going to bomb you or not. That's the point. Or if
Do you
America
think
props up.
Dubai is worried about America bombing them?
Who? Dubai?
Yeah.
No, that Dubai is the other side of Dubai is the other side of the equation. That's the point. It's either you're worried about America bombing you, so you can't even engage in any sort of like initiative to fight back against your own government, or the American government is offering you so much security in terms of like the military that a violent repression is all but inevitable if you try to push back. The point, however, is that do you think that there are no homosexual people living in Dubai? Of course there are. It's more so that they are repressed and are unable to fight back because America has propped up these monarchs and giving them a shit ton of weapons to be able to continue dominating their own citizens.
I think that you blame too much of all of this on America. I think that America
It's
does
not,
play a role in
forget
this.
America. It doesn't matter. America is a catch-all term here. Like,
Sure.
it's whoever is like offering religious fundamentalists an opportunity to continue dominating their own population. If it wasn't America, it'd be a different country if they were doing the same thing. That it just happens to be that it is America right now because it is the global hegemonic superpower.
Sure. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. I think that the big problem is that if you have a religion and you are basing your culture off of that religion, and that religion is used to oppress people, that type of culture is inferior. And whether that changes in the future, whether anything happens in the past, is irrelevant. At this current point, the way that they handle things is awful. It is
There is no,
absolutely
but
awful.
also again, we have to both recognize that like Palestinians are not handling anything but just a genocide right now. So there
You're
is no,
completely right.
okay. So when you recognize that, and you talk about um the barbaric nature or the immoral nature of like Palestinian existence without analyzing it within the framework of
Oh, I
76
never
years of,
said that it was I never said that it was barbaric or their existence. I said that their behavior and the way that they treat people is bad. It's
yeah,
extremely bad and it's
it's
inferior
not
to ours.
it's not a
It's
real
not
thing at
bad.
all. No, because it's not. You said they were inferior
I
when
did.
it is completely outside of the scope of Palestinians when they do not have any sort of sovereignty. I think you did use the term barbaric if I'm not mistaken. But once again,
Well, the
if you
behavior is
consider, if
barbaric.
you,
The people are not, obviously, right? I mean, like, of course, every person that lives in a country does not have the same viewpoints, but the country as an entity, or any sort of group of people as an entity, does have this viewpoint.
okay,
And the U.S. used to have this viewpoint too.
yeah. And in
Yeah.
that time frame, if the United States was being mercilessly and ruthlessly bombed by, I guess, an alien force that is, because like the power dynamic, the disproportionality of the power that like a nuclear armed militant state in the region that is backed by the hegemonic superpower America is incomprehensible from the perspective of Americans. So I have to use like an alien force with
Sure.
superior
Yeah.
technology in this situation. If we were getting fucking ruthlessly slaughtered by an alien force, I wouldn't give a fuck if someone was homophobic or not. I'd be like, thank you for fighting against the alien force. That seems awesome that you're doing that. I would actually arm up side by side with my fellow homophobic Republican, rabid Christian fundamentalist sociopaths to try and protect my home. And that's the point.
I think that that's probably true to an extent, but there's not really an alien invasion. I mean, that's not even what's
No, I know.
happening.
The only
Like
reason
you're
why I'm
talking,
using that as a
what
hypothetical is because there is no world power that
yeah.
represents that disproportionality that America and Israel present over an occupied territory of Palestinians that literally cannot even engage in regular foreign trade, and Israel dominates their life to such a degree that like they literally used to deny cookies from entering the Gaza Strip or pasta from entering the Gaza Strip, a practice that the Israeli Kojat authorities considered putting the Palestinians on a diet. That level of ruthless domination over the course of 76 years is probably going to harden you against the group that is dominating you, is probably going to make you hate the
That's
group that is dominating you. And
sure,
it's
but you're not
righteous
being
and
dominated by
correct
gay
to hate
people.
them.
You're
What's
not
up?
being dominated by gay people. You're not being dominated by transsexual people. Like
What?
I totally agree that yes, of course, like
No,
it
no.
makes
Gay
sense
people
that
and trans people,
Palestinians.
gay people and trans people are not a part of what I'm saying. I'm saying
Mhm.
that the gay people and the trans people that are living under those conditions in Gaza,
Yeah.
right, see Israel as a far larger problem in their existence than they do like Islamic fundamentalism in terms of governance, which hasn't even been like a real way that Palestinians be able to govern themselves because they've never had sovereignty. That's the point. And I talk to gay people in the region
Yeah,
all the
sure.
time. I talk to gay people in Lebanon. They have a similar opinion. It's not like Hezbollah is a fan of gay people in Lebanon.
I've heard about that. Yes.
Yeah, and yet they also view Israel as a far larger, far more violent, far more consequential force of evil than they do Hezbollah. Now, there are naysayers. You will find some people who are like, oh, I'm so glad that Israel is bombing Lebanon, as a Lebanese person, certainly. But that is the reality that unfolds time and time again. And there are a million historical examples and a million contemporary examples I can point to when a much larger sovereign nation comes in and blows up your house. All of a sudden, you're not thinking about sucking dick, okay? You're just not. You're not thinking about getting gender confirmation surgery or being able to fucking get your HRT on time. You're thinking, oh my God, my house exploded. What the fuck do I do? You're thinking, I have to run. And you're feeling grateful for people who are fighting back. That's just it. And that's the existence for Palestinian people. It's not necessarily that they're like monolithically barbaric or immoral or inferior to Western culture. It's just that they're busy being like, I want cookies sometimes. And that would be nice if I could get it. And that's on a good day, by the way. On a bad day, like yesterday, they're thinking, oh my God, my family members burned in a tent hospital in Al-Aqsa because Israel lit it on fire.
Well, who says Israel's good? Israel, like, I don't think anybody thinks Israel is good.
But
I'm just saying that, like, that culture, and like, again,
it's
if
not
you go back
that
to it,
culture is my point. You can't monolithize an entire group of people, Asmon. That's the point.
No, you can't. But what you can say is that the people that are controlling it, like you said with Hezbollah, these people are not fans of this. And I'm not going to try to be guilt-tripped into picking the lesser of two evils. And I don't think that after this conflict is over, if it ever ends, I don't think that they're going to magically get together and just let gay people do what they want. I don't think that's what's going to happen.
You're imagining a world without any sort of evidence by pointing to other countries in the region that are literally directly at odds with these two groups of individuals that are directly funding and facilitating and allowing Israel to continue doing this kind of thing. By pointing to them and saying, well, this is just the nature of this people. And that is not the case. And that is my point.
Oh, it's not the nature of the people. It's a culture. It's an ideology.
It would be like saying, sorry, America is an inferior culture circa 2013, or America is still an inferior culture when Trump inevitably wins in 2024 and implement some of the things that they wanted to implement in terms of, like, the Supreme Court has openly stated that they want to fucking even revoke the Obergefell decision. Like, when that happens, I don't think you will say America is an inferior culture. I think you will say that there are a lot of religious fundamentalists that have overtaken this government and is now moving America in the wrong direction. And if you can understand that for your fellow citizens...
I would say that. I would say that it would become inferior. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think that if you compare our culture that we have now to 20 years ago, we are superior than we were 20 years ago. And I think that if you look at 40 years ago, it's even more the case. And I think it continues to become more.
So you understand that. That's great. Okay. So my point, however, is that now add on to that equation a military force that is so much more powerful that, like, there is no global current existing counter. Like, I can't say this about China. Like, the difference in military might between China and America is that America is still far greater in terms of military superpower than China is. There is no comparison between the disproportionality of the violence that Palestinian people face from Israel and America that like suits the bill of, like, Americans potentially being dominated and destroyed. If Donald Trump was, which is the reason why I use the hypothetical example of an alien force with, like, mega nukes or something that can just, like, wipe out entire cities overnight, just to help you understand the proportionality of this violence that Palestinians are subjected to. If Donald Trump tomorrow came into power and moved America in that direction, and then aliens invaded America, I think yourself and myself, alongside everyone else, would try our very best to fight back against the aliens rather than turn around and be like, well, hold up now. You know, we gotta really figure out gay marriage again. We gotta bring back gay marriage right now. We can't do that. And that's precisely what has
I
happened
don't
to the
always think
Palestinian
that's what's going to
population.
happen. I don't think that's what's going to happen. And I understand, like, I feel like you are very optimistic about this. I don't share that
I'm
optimism.
not.
I don't think that's
I'm
what,
realistic because it bears no basis. Like
I don't know.
the cultural hangups at this moment are utterly irrelevant. Just like African tribes and their practices of like maybe homophobia or whatever the fuck people said at the time, some of
Very
which was
bad.
true and some of which was not,
It's bad.
did not justify chattel slavery, or the Nat Turner Rebellion did not justify the reaction to continue the dominance and the practice of chattel
I
slavery.
think that there's nobody, I don't think there's anybody that's like justifying any genocide, right? I'm not justifying. I don't think anybody would justify.
I
That's
know, but
crazy.
I think that when you say that they're an
Yeah.
inferior culture and I won't defend them, understandably people think, oh, okay, so you don't have an issue with the way things are unfolding currently.
I mean, I think that people are going to interpret things however they want to in order to make it seem like it's something that fits their worldview that they've already decided on.
Fair,
I think
but
that, yeah,
would you say it's fair that people make that would make that assumption about your statements when there's an ongoing genocide that you consider to be you know, inappropriate and
I think,
unjustifiable?
yeah, no, I think that it's bad. For sure. Of course it's bad.
Okay.
People are going to look at that. They're going to look at what I say, and they're going to make their decision off of that for whatever reason, right? I have no idea. One thing that I've learned on the internet is that it doesn't matter what you say. Most people have already decided if you're right or wrong before they watch the clip. That's really the truth. So I'm not really that concerned about that. Of course, I don't support killing random fucking people, right? Nobody supports killing random fucking people. But if you're talking about supporting a country and supporting a government or like a group that is in power, I would absolutely not support one that uses that power to oppress people based off of their identity. I
That's
think that,
that's fine,
and
but like I
I
said,
really hope.
there has not been
Here's the thing.
a single moment where the Palestinians have had any breathing room outside of like Israeli occupation where they have engaged in this sort of self-governance that you speak of. So it doesn't
And
necessarily matter in the grand scheme of things where there's
here's
an active genocide going on.
here's the thing. I really hope that we can end the genocide. The Palestinians will be able to make their own decisions, and we'll see which one of us is right about this.
Okay.
I I do. That's my perspective.
Okay.
Because like
But
I
it
don't
bears
think
no
I don't think I can convince you, and I don't think you can really convince me about this. But I think that we do
no.
agree
I'm saying it
that
doesn't
doing this
matter.
is
To me,
okay.
it doesn't matter
Okay, go
because
ahead.
it's not because I don't care
Yeah.
about queer liberation. Of course I do. But I understand, as do you, by the way, that genocide is the far greater evil, that it bears no basis in my analysis on whether genocide is right or wrong, as do you also admit. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, Palestinians are, barbaric, especially because like they're not. And I understand that Palestinians are people just like Americans are, right? And that some have these kinds of opinions and others don't. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. Like the way you just said earlier in this conversation,
Sure.
that of course you're going to have a different way of analyzing your fellow Americans, right?
Of
In
course.
comparison to the
Yeah.
way you analyze and interpret this entire region of people. That is like, whether, I don't know if you recognize this or not, but that is like at the heart of right wing sentiment or bigoted sentiment, which then opens up the floodgates to a lot of other justifications that befall the Palestinian population. Whether you're doing that inadvertently or not doesn't change that dynamic, because it's
Are we really trying to say that people are going to have the same values? They're going to care about a group of people across the world just as much as the people in their own town? Like I think that that's just so
I hope
divorced
no,
from reality.
I do. I genuinely do believe that. And I personally have that opinion. So yes, I am telling you right now, 100%, and it's not because I'm from Turkey or grew up in a Muslim country that I have this opinion. It is
Yeah.
an opinion that I have, and that's precisely the way. That's precisely the reason why I say to you right now that there
Right.
are people that are directly at odds with the way I view the world. There are people who want to kill me, and I still wish the best upon them. I mean this genuinely. I want them to get healthcare. I want them to have educational opportunities, and I want them to have a ladder of upward social mobility, because I truly believe that if they had these material freedoms, that it would be less likely for them to become right-wing charlatans or people who want to fucking kill me in general. Like, that's my point. And that's how that is exactly how I view all world conflicts, that these are people, there's a diversity of opinion amongst any group of people, and there is nothing different about them, regardless of where they were born, regardless of what they believe, that if given the same exact opportunities, if a Palestinian that was born in Gaza was instead born in the United States of America, they would be just like every other American. There is no difference between the way they see the world. There is no value that is like genetically brought upon them. They are all responding to stimuli in the same way that you are. They're responding to their material conditions in the same exact way that you are. The only difference is they were born under a colonial rule, an occupation that is very brutal and very humiliating, that dominates every aspect of their lives, whereas you and I, myself included, were born in the United States of America, and therefore we have a tremendous amount more freedom in terms of like in terms of what we believe, what kind of opportunities we want to pursue, and
Because we don't live in a religious theocracy, because that would be worse.
no, it's not. There is no intractable quality of people born under a religious theocracy. Like, no one, if you were to talk to regular
The individuals,
Saudi citizens, or regular citizens from Qatar, or regular
Yeah.
citizens from Dubai, there are plenty of people who don't like that form of governance, who want something to change, who want to change their governments so that they can live free lives in the same way that like
Yeah.
Americans, to a certain degree, in comparison to those other countries, can live freely and express themselves sexually, even though there is plenty of setbacks here in modern America as well, towards trans people, for example. And the only difference is where they were born. And I don't think that that is a sentence of that automatically means that they're immoral people. I do not make my assumptions about an entire region of the planet just by the nature of where they were born. I talk to people as they're human beings.
If
As
you took
individuals.
everybody that was in China and you put them in a random place, what do you think the laws would be like? Do you think they'd be like Chinese laws?
What do you mean? Like where? Like if everyone in China was born in the United States of America,
Yeah.
I think that the American governance would be exactly the same. It's entirely dependent on the material conditions, and it's dependent on geology, dependent on your natural resources. Like, I don't know how much more they would differ, but if a shit ton of Chinese people immigrated into the United States of America, for example, as they have, yes, they would become Americanized, as is the case with undocumented migrants, for example. There are plenty of studies conducted on this as well. We can talk about that too if you want.
I think that's so that's a good point, but I also think that whenever you've had large contingencies of people from other cultures that come into, like, let's say the UK, they have tried to push for other laws. They have tried to change the laws there. They
What do you mean?
absolutely have.
What do you mean?
About like people pushing for new laws
Like in terms of what?
in
Like,
terms of how people can express themselves, in terms of how people can act in public. Yes.
you need to elaborate a little bit. I'm a little confused
Sure.
about what you're saying.
What I'm saying is that there have been a lot of instances where people that have come from another country that come into a new country make the new country like their old country. I think that's what would make sense.
Is there an example of this in modern history or in any time in American history at all?
Yeah. An example is that, so I live in Austin, Texas, and I can drive over to other parts of Austin, Texas that are a lot closer to Mexico than they are like America. They have Spanish names, and there's a bunch of people there because a lot of those people came from another culture. Absolutely.
Wait,
I
I mean
think that's the same everywhere
Texas is probably the worst example for this because like
because of the war,
well, no, because
like the
Texas,
border and
the
everything.
border across them is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
the
yeah,
common
sure.
sentiment is in
Right.
general. But in terms of like Texas culture, I don't. I mean, Texas. Here, I'll give you actual data on this. Right, studies are
Sure.
conducted on this stuff all the time. There's always a new group of migrants that are coming from a specific part of the world, whether it's because they're like economic refugees, economic migrants, or if they're like escaping war or some kind
Yeah.
of like political struggle in their in the on the home front, right? And whenever there's always dare I say violent resistance to that, and the qualities of that violent resistance, like that immediate reaction, doesn't necessarily change until they become a part of the in group. A great example I can give you is the Irish, for example, or the Italian migration
Yeah.
that has occurred in the United States of America. Similar attitudes were demonstrated towards Italian people or Irish people. Oh, they're
Oh,
changing the
look,
culture.
bro, like there are so many redneck, like Hispanic people here. The
Y-
super
yeah,
Republican, yes. And they are the ones that are always about build the wall. Yes,
yeah.
no, I totally, you're completely right.
Okay, so
Of
they
course that
become
happens.
Americanized, and there's data for this as well. So the data shows that
Oh, it
by
happens
the
and it
second
doesn't happen.
generation, the data shows that by the second generation, regardless of where people are coming from, whether it's Guatemala, whether it's Mexico, whether it's a Latin American country or Norway, by the second generation or China, Americans assimilate almost completely, and by the third generation, they have completely assimilated. And there are examples of this around you that you can probably point to. People that are maybe two generations removed from being fresh off the boat, or one generation removed from being fresh off the boat, that are impossible to associate with anything but American culture. The people that
We
you
had in
meet
my
on
high
a
school, we had a lot of Eric Hernandez's.
yeah. So
I
that
totally understand what you're
so
saying.
that is what I mean when I say like most people that come from other cultures that are deemed inferior or declared different ultimately do end up assimilating to
Well, that
the culture of the country that they immigrated to,
well, 2 generations
and
later isn't the
generation by
same
generation
people.
that changes rapidly.
Well, I mean, you're talking about like, the way that one person is like 2 generations later. Of course, I'm not going to be like my grandfather. I'm sure you're not either. Of
Yeah,
course, people change over time. But
yeah.
I'm
So that
saying that if you take people from a culture, those are going to be their values. That is their values. Now, will that change over time based off of where they're at? Absolutely it will. Of course it will. But
okay.
it's not like a switch. It's not some like switch like somebody just comes over somewhere and they're just completely different.
Yeah, but
And
ultimately,
so,
second generation it changes. So like their next of kin that is born on U.S.
yeah.
soil with the same rights and same responsibilities, like ultimately exhibit the exact same outcomes regardless. Once they are firmly a part of the in group, so ultimately, I guess that like kind of it kind of goes against the argument that you were presenting earlier that you
Mhm.
also recognize, right? Like that these people they come in and they are not monolithic. Okay, they are not monolithic in their understanding of the world at all. And while there might be some cultural differences, ultimately nothing like inferior or superior to one another.
Oh,
I don't
no, I don't
personally
know
engage
about
in that.
that. I don't know about that. I think that there are differences that are inferior and superior. It's not even a question.
I don't think that people are impossible to change. That is not
But
something that I
having
believe.
to change them implies that they should change.
I
And
don't think
that's what
people
I'm saying.
yes,
I think that some things
I
should
think that in
change.
terms of inferiority, I wouldn't necessarily say cultural inferiority, I'd
I
say conservatism. That's the way I view the world. Like from my perspective, I think that a lot of the things that people point to, a lot of the issues that people point to actually is just simply conservatism being repackaged as like an intractable quality of a different culture.
Okay, let me ask you this question.
Because
Do you think that we'd be having this conversation if I said conservatism instead? Because like obviously like a lot of people are upset about it
because it's an entirely different thing. Because conservatism can change. People can change their minds. People can change their attitudes, but people cannot change their like the way that they're analyzed by the in-group that is the dominant group in power. If they're being analyzed as like an intractable, inalienable group of like a force almost that is like completely monolithic. Yes, if you were to say that the conservatism demonstrated by certain groups is inferior to I don't know, like broader. It's not even that their conservatism is different. It's just conservatism adjusted to their material conditions as well.
I feel like you kind of have the same viewpoint on this that I do, though. Like it's just that like your vocabulary is different.
No,
I think that really okay.
No, of course not. Because for me, it's not like the cultural differences. I like to say that there is a universality to hogs. I call conservatives hogs all the time. I do hog watch, whatever, right? And
I've seen it.
And the reason why I don't have an issue saying that, even though many people get very upset at me when I say things like that, is because conservatism or liberalism, okay, is just simply a way of understanding the world. Reactionary approaches to understanding the world is simply a way that you look at the regular stimuli that you experience on a daily basis, and your analysis can change. Your analysis can very easily change, and you can be an entirely different person. There's a shit ton of people that are in my community that used to be right-wing on one issue or many other issues that have over time understood and demonstrated empathy and have changed their minds on these issues and no longer consider themselves to be conservative. Whereas when you engage in like cultural inferiority in conversations like that, there is an intractable quality that is associated with this like entire group of individuals, and entire group of people, instead of individualizing them as like people that might have a different perspective than you that can change over time, you end up treating them as the other. And that is what I try to fight against on a regular basis here as well. Like there are groupings that are appropriate, like for example, Nazis, people who believe in Nazi ideology or fascist ideology. You can group them just as well as you can group like socialists or any other form of ideology, and you can associate certain aspects of their understanding of the world as like you can ascribe certain aspects of the way that they analyze the world as good or bad. But when you start talking about like inferior cultures, that sets up the opportunity for historically at least dehumanization, and also it justifies a lot of the atrocities that those people end up experiencing.
But you do agree that those viewpoints though are worse, right?
What do you mean?
Well, like for example, being against it's against the law to be gay. Like this is a worse viewpoint.
I think it's
okay.
I think that bigotry of that sort is of course abhorrent. I do not agree with that at all. But
how would you define that?
But like, I mean, would you say
would you say conservatism is inferior to liberalism?
I think conservatism is wrong. That's the way I see it. I do personally consider it to be inferior, but I also have the understanding that like the conservatives here in the United States of America are conservative within the boundaries that are permissible to American society. They respond to American material conditions. If the conservative mindset, which can change, okay, because no one is born a reactionary, no one is born a conservative. But let's say someone was someone that is conservative here, if they automatically teleported and adjusted to the material conditions of like conservatism in Iran, they would be no different than the mullahs. That's my opinion. Like, and that's precisely the reason why plenty of Americans.
Yes, I totally agree with you about that. I think that if you got together a lot of preachers in like, these southern racist churches, you group them up with people from the Taliban, I think that they'd have a lot in common.
Yes.
I totally agree
even the
with you.
likes of
And
even
I
the
think
likes of Ben Shapiro,
yes,
it's adjusted to American society. It doesn't have to be a
absolutely.
one-to-one comparison. It's adjusted to American
Yes.
society because ultimately, what do our conservatives do? Like an example I use regularly is you have the what's that fucking church that always goes to like even
Westboro Baptist Church.
yeah, Westboro Baptist Church. Like those
Yeah.
guys are fucking insane, right?
They are.
But what do? Instead of going and rising up in arms and like fucking murking gay people, they go and protest outside of like, I don't know, non-denominational churches, or they go protest like at a
Right.
gay funeral. And then what do? They go back home and eat $5 jalapeno poppers at Applebee's because that
Sure.
is the material reality of living in the United States of America. A lot of your needs are fulfilled, a lot of your needs are met. If the dynamic was that America resembled, I don't know, the Korengal Valley, or America resembled fucking the material conditions of like a Gaza, you bet your fucking ass that those guys would absolutely, or Iran is a better example in this circumstance, they would be doing the same shit. They would be doing not even the shit that the mullahs are doing. They'd be doing ISIS shit. They'd be fucking throwing gay people off the roofs. You know what I mean? And
Thank God that we have American culture to
but it's
keep
not. But
that
you
in
see,
check.
no, but that's not American culture. You see, that is American
I think it
material
is.
reality.
It is our material reality that we've created through our culture.
No, no, culture is
Okay,
not
you
what
disagree.
created this material reality. I absolutely disagree with that. Yes, it is American domination that that there is an invisibility to that has allowed us to live in the heart of luxury. There is no cultural underpinning that made Americans like exist in the way that they do. It's more so just military dominance.
You think a culture has no impact on the success of a country?
No, I don't think so. I think that culture is created after the material realities. Yeah, no, I don't think that there's like anything unique. See, that's what I mean. Do you think that there is some uniqueness to like someone being American? And if you think that there's a uniqueness to someone being American, then what happened before America even existed, right? Or if there's a uniqueness to someone being American, do you think that they like any person living somewhere else would directly be at odds if they were to come into the United States of America, and they would not be able to Americanize?
I think some people aren't. And I'm sure there's a spectrum for that. There's some people that come into America and they Americanize right away. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, myself.
And, well, yeah, there you go. And so, because like you came over here, you 12.
I came
right?
here when I was 18.
Oh shit. Okay. Wow. Okay. Way
Yeah.
later. Yeah. So yeah, you just fit right in. It's no big deal. Other
Well-
people, it's totally different. I think a big reason for that is language too.
Certainly,
Like you
that
speak
is
English.
that is a part of it. But my point is, I don't think that like American culture is like is superior. There's plenty of
I do.
issues that you have also.
Yes.
There's plenty of issues that you've also mentioned in American culture that makes it, there's plenty of issues with American governance right now that I don't think it like America is a superior culture at all. I don't think that there is any reason to have these
completely
kinds of
agree with you with
conversations.
that.
What?
I totally agree with you about that. And I think that the evidence that it's a superior and great culture is the fact that we can talk about those things openly without any fear of negative repercussions.
Well,
I think it is. I do. And think about how many countries do not enjoy the privilege that we have right now.
yeah,
and
it's
that
because
is why I think that our culture is
they're
great.
constantly. If we're talking about like countries in the global south, that is directly a consequence of being under constant domination. That's the whole point.
Oh, I mean, come on. We both know that there's
No,
plenty
that
of
is
countries that are
100%.
not under. Well, what about China? What about Russia? Right?
No,
I mean,
that's a great okay, you just brought up a great
ahead.
example. You
Yeah.
brought up a great example. Okay. America, and you will see this, we're starting to experience this right now, but you will probably start seeing this a little bit more. Has not had the bountiful and fully liberated attitude towards our First Amendment throughout even American history. And that is going to come back right now. The only reason why America gets to be the way it is because it was the domineering force on the planet for a very long time without any sort of real without any sort of real threat. During the Cold War era, we had the McCarthy trials. Being a communist is still technically illegal in the books, but no one really applies it.
Is that true? I've never
Yeah,
heard that.
yeah. The
I'll take your
Espionage
word for
Act
it.
was
That sounds insane.
the Espionage Act was directly designed during World War II in an effort to stop people from speaking out against the war efforts. Like, so
Sure.
even throughout American history during the Cold War, and even before that during World War II and even World War I, there were plenty of instances where naysayers were actually jailed. Something that seems insane to contend with now in current American existence, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Horrible.
And yet, historically speaking, revolutionary figures have not only been imprisoned, but also been assassinated by the American state, specifically black revolutionary figures in our history. And that was because...
Or attempted to assassinate, like with Martin Luther King.
Yeah. So, he was assassinated.
But like, was that? But like, what I'm saying is, like, it was not really determined that it was from the U.S. But the U.S. had it a bit. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
The point is, you do that when you are afraid, when you don't have like weak governments and governments that are worried about complete control, engage in these like authoritarian acts. And yes, America, I suspect, especially with like China growing in power on the global stage, engaging in a lot of soft power initiatives, especially, is causing American society and American governance to become once again as restrictive as it once was during the Cold War. And I think that we will see a very different understanding of the First Amendment. And I can give you a current understanding of the direct violation of the First Amendment and free speech as we know it and understand it.
Give me an example.
BDS laws, boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the state of Israel. BDS laws, or BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, was a movement that was created against apartheid South Africa. It was to apply social pressure by taking advantage of this wonderful First Amendment that we have here to directly demand that the American government and American corporations boycott the state of South Africa. Now, Israel was a big ally to South Africa at the time, and they learned from the lessons of South Africa, as the BDS movement was very successful in creating a shit ton of pressure and making South Africa as an apartheid state into a pariah state. And what happened at the end of the day, South Africans also recognized that they were becoming a pariah state and could not continue their normal existence with like their Western collaborators and whatnot. And inevitably, the apartheid ended. Israel learned that lesson and decided to lobby the American government and lobby American Congress and write direct laws that are in contravention with the First Amendment. In 32 states right now in the United States of America, including the state that you're currently in, if you want to be a public school teacher, you have to sign a piece of paper, at least now. I don't know if you have any family members that are school teachers. You have to sign a piece of paper that says you will never participate in boycotting or demanding sanctions or demanding divestment from the state of Israel.
Holy fuck, are you kidding me?
Yes.
Oh my God. What a joke. I never heard of that.
So
that's so fucking stupid.
So that paired up with the new...
I mean, like, no, here's the thing, right? That's fucking terrible. You're totally right.
Yeah.
That's all, like, I mean, because, this is bad.
Okay.
I don't know how this happens.
I mean, that happened over many, many years of people being like, well, the Palestinians kind of deserve it because Israel's our great ally and it's the only moral democracy in the fucking region. And it's the only democracy in the region. It happened with a shit ton of efforts to propagandize Israel's position as what it actually was not, which it was directly at odds of. And most people are completely and utterly unfamiliar. And any kind of person that was criticizing it, like a person like myself, was immediately branded an anti-Semite for calling into question this foreign nation and their direct lobbying efforts to undermine American First Amendment laws.
You got labeled as the anti-Semite of the day, didn't you?
Of the week from solveantisemitism.org. Yes.
Yeah.
So
like, and I do want to make sure that like it's very much established that like in the same way that criticizing any sort of like Zionism or Israel or whatever is not anti-Semitism. It absolutely is not. I don't think criticizing the outcomes of certain cultures is any form of racism. I don't think so either.
No, but I don't criticize. But I'm not talking about like Jewish culture. Do you see what I'm saying? When I talk about Israel, I'm talking about the direct actions of the Israeli state as it stands. It's direct actions that are the maintenance of an apartheid state. I'm talking about settler colonialism. I'm not talking about like an intractable quality of like Jewish people that makes them immoral or inferior to anybody else. I don't believe
I
that.
think that of course. I think it really like you can't if you look at people through like I guess like I don't know like really what the word is for it, like basically just like a statistic. I think that looking at people through statistics is fundamentally dehumanizing. I think that you're right. Of course it is.
Okay.
It's by definition
Like,
dehumanizing. But
so
I
for
think that you can look at the actions of the people that are in charge of those countries and say that those actions are not actions that you support
yeah,
in the same
I
way that you do.
agree. But I
And that
also
was that
rate
was
on a
my point of
curve.
view.
I also rate on a curve in terms of like what is immediately in front of me.
Mhm.
You know?
I understand. I don't like the tier list idea. I see your point of view.
But it's not
I
a tier
see
list. It's just like there is.
well,
Well, in terms of not being a tier list, there are certain things that are there are certain things that go beyond, and I think everyone kind of intrinsically understands this. Like there are certain things that go beyond the tier list, right? Like there is no like I don't like I consider the Holocaust and the genocide that the Nazi government engaged
yeah,
in to be morally repugnant, like one of the worst things that has ever happened
it was not good.
historically. And
Yeah,
I consider chattel slavery in that same vein and the
and
maintenance of
also
it.
not good.
Yeah. And so I don't think or care about like the way that uh, German Jews operated or their understanding of like homosexuality at the time. That bears no basis. Just like I don't care about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising like being violent. I think that it was the moral and righteous thing to do. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was the correct thing to do at the time. And that's because I look at the far greater evil and the far greater violence in that circumstance, and I consider it to be unproductive to think about like what people did in resisting towards that violence, because as long as it never meets the standard of the dominating force, like ultimately it doesn't matter. I'm not going to hypothesize like what German Jews would have done if they had the same military power that Germany did. Would they have dominated like the Volkish German society in the same way that like Nazi Germany dominated the Jews? No, I don't think so. And I don't. There is no evidence that they would do such a thing. And that's my perspective on the matter.
Well, I think
And the
that the
same
reason
thing,
for that
and
is
that's how
because
I feel
that
about the
group.
Palestinians.
I understand that. Well, I mean, I feel like a lot of Palestinians. I mean, I've seen videos of Palestinians celebrating 9/11, right? I mean, I mean,
Palestinians.
yeah. I mean, I'm not sure really whether this is entirely true with all of them, and also like,
But
so
like I don't
you're
even, do
looking.
you fault them for celebrating like I mean there were
Do,
Palestinians that were
do
celebrating
I?
like Iran attacking Israel, for example. Iran
Of
did a
course.
retaliation strike against Israel, and they said that they were going to hit two air bases, and they were going to hit the Mossad headquarters directly
Do
inside of Tel
I?
Aviv.
Do
Eh,
I fault Do I fault somebody, not Palestinians? Let's just say anybody, for celebrating the deaths of a lot of people that are innocent? Yes, I think it's bad.
Do you
It
think
is
that
bad.
if Jews in concentration camps were celebrating the bombing of Dresden, would you fault them in a similar vein?
I would say that it was bad. Yeah, it would.
Jews in
Obviously, it's bad.
concentration camps, if they were to see like bombs falling over Dresden and they were like, wow, this is sick, like we're going to get liberated, I think like things are changing, I would not fault them. I think that they have
I
every
think that
right to do so.
so I think that a lot of things you can understand why somebody is doing something,
And but for the record,
and
I
it
also think like Dresden was
it
like
was
the bombing of
disgusting.
Dresden, for example, was considered to not be appropriate in terms of like all the civilian infrastructure and civilian targets that were destroyed, which is why we applied new rules of war after World War II. But even then, in that very moment, I would never in a million years turn around and be like, man, these Jews these Jews in Dachau are sure getting a little too excited about the bombing of Dresden. Like, I would not say that. I don't think you would either.
I don't think that it's really something that like you would focus on a lot, but I think that it's easy to acknowledge killing innocent people isn't a good thing. And of course it can be understandable and things can have an explanation, but the explanation isn't necessarily a justification, if that makes sense. So like I see your point of view and about how like there's a certain degree of this where it's like understandable. And I agree with you that it is understandable. But I think that understandable bad behavior in a lot of cases is still in fact bad behavior. And I don't really think that like it's impossible to know what somebody else would do in a circumstance that they're not part of. But what I do know is that when I see a group of people that are celebrating a bunch of innocent people getting killed, then I think that that group of people is doing something that's wrong. And I think that it's universally wrong. And I understand that from their point of view, and I can easily put myself in their shoes, and I can see the reason why they think that.
So
Absolutely,
you'd be the one teenager in Gaza being like, hold on, guys. Let's not celebrate the Iranian retaliation against this country that is like literally eviscerated my family.
You
like,
know what
you'd be
I'd
like,
be
no,
doing?
this is
I would be cheering it on. I would say yes. Fuck
okay,
yes.
I'm glad that you agree.
But
Okay.
I wouldn't be sitting on a soapbox saying that I'm the good guy. I would be like,
No,
yeah, fuck
I still
you.
think
You get what you fucking deserve. That's
they're
what I
not
would
the
say.
good guys in this situation. They're the victims, and that's the point. Like, I'm not going to fault the victims of genocide for experiencing a little bit of joy in that moment. And
I get
then,
that, but sometimes victims can create more victims.
well, historically, so that's a good example. That's a good point that you made. This is something that every single like world-changing event. This is a genuine fear that a lot of people have exhibited in the aftermath of the abolition of slavery in the Reconstruction era. Okay, there was a lot of fear from the whites in the South that newly freed slaves were going to come and like dominate them and enslave them. That of course didn't happen, but they very quickly sought to restore the racial pecking order, and they were able to do so. And the violence actually even in the aftermath of like liberation of a people that were dominated, the violence usually still comes from people that don't want that sort of change. So it's not necessarily that it wasn't that like black people were like dominating white people and like enslaving them or anything or like killing them. It was more so white people that were fearful that they would do such a thing, that or at least use that unjustifiable fear as a way to continue dominating black people. That's how we came up with Jim Crow laws and segregation and the like. And that's where the Klan was invented.
We've been very creative with racism.
What?
Oh, I know. We've been very creative with racism.
Yeah. So
the 3/5 compromise.
But you have to remember.
Law.
But you have to remember once again, it was never. But black people did not actually end up dominating white people. Is my point, and not because they weren't given the opportunity. There was no interest or need. The idea that the idea that like colonial victims will do the very same. If given the opportunity is false. It has never happened throughout history, and that's my point. That usually is the domineering principle from those who are at least like watching from the sidelines, or those who are directly a part of the dominating group, like the colonial entity. But that's usually not how it goes. That's never how it goes.
Right? So if Palestine had the ability to, do you think Israel would exist?
That's a great question. One that people ask me all the time. If Palestine, if historic Palestine existed, right, in the same way as like a nuclear militant force, Israel as an apartheid regime would not exist. Israel would have never been able to dominate and occupy Palestinian villages and wipe out Palestinians, and that there is no. Like the dynamic would be so different that
Where would they
the
go?
dynamic would be so different that like the notion that Palestinians would wipe out Israel is silly. Like it's not. There would be no need for the Palestinians to wipe out Israeli citizens because that need is born out of being removed from their homes, their ancestral homelands, and being destroyed. If, for example, in the 20s, when the settler colonial initiative started after the Balfour Declaration, if this was not done as a dominating force, British Empire at the time, was not purposely and willingly shipping Jewish people into the region and giving them areas that they had declared that was basically created in the same way that like America was created, giving them areas of land specifically. And instead, if Jewish people were like voluntarily migrating into the region, then it would resemble American society. It would be a diverse society of Jews and Muslims and Christians living side by side. But that is a complete alternative history in this situation, so I don't even know how that would work.
Massively. Yeah, it's total alternative. Well, I don't know whether that would happen.
I could point to like Ottoman rule in the region because Jews did live in the region under Ottoman occupation, and they were cohabitating the space without much struggle or fight at all, as a matter of fact.
I think that you're right about that. I do. If I think about it myself, and I feel like back then, definitely a better cultural viewpoint on that. I think so. I don't know what would happen if Israel wasn't able to defend itself. Would they continue to exist? Right? It's very hard to say.
No, but
because it's like we're making predictions.
In terms of the resistance, right? In terms of resistance, everyone was just like, "Oh, Palestinians are inherently anti-Semitic." Joe Biden himself said,
"No,
Joe Biden himself said, Palestinians demonstrate an ancient form of anti-Semitism, and that's why they are, resisting against Israel." This is not the case.
Right.
Many of Palestinian resistance leaders throughout history, including ones that are religious fundamentalists, including ones that are secular, including ones that are very including ones that are Christian, including ones that are Marxist, socialist, they've always said that this has nothing to do with Judaism or Jews in general. If Israel was a Christian state, or if Israel was a Muslim state, and they said that they were doing, then they would, hate. Then they would hate Israel as a Muslim state. It has nothing to do. It bears no basis. And Palestinian resistance throughout time.
You're right about that.
And Palestinian resistance throughout time has hardened and has become more violent as Israel has become more violent towards Palestinians, because the standard is always set by the occupying power. And it goes in the opposite direction as well. If Palestinians were allowed to coexist amongst Israelis in a singular nation state, then there would be no conflict. There would be no Hamas, because these groups would be dealt with under civil governance. If there were groups that, for example, like the Klan, for example, like there's the Jewish Power Party, which is the Klan, but for Judaism. It's built around. Is that like
over in Israel?
Yeah. Well, it's originally it's an American Jewish guy whose name is Meir Kahan. There's an entire movement of Jewish superiority, Jewish dominance. It's basically, in the simplest terms, it resembles the Klan. But imagine if, like, instead of Christianity, the Klan was like Jewish, I guess.
So it's racial superiority. I mean,
racial superiority, ethnic superiority, and religious superiority. Sure. So, like, those groups historically inside of Israel, before they became a part of the current Israeli government as they are now, those groups used to be treated as like criminals, terrorists. Now, of course, Israeli society, because those groups were usually only terrorizing Muslims and Palestinians and Christian Palestinians, Muslim Palestinians alike, were oftentimes let go with a slap on the wrist, including but not limited to Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is the current, I guess, like in charge of the national police. I forget what his like actual responsibility is. He very famously, in Israel, back in the day, pointed to the hubcap of the former Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin weeks before his assassination and said, "We have his hubcap of his car or we have like the emblem of his car. We can get to his car tomorrow. We will get to him. And then he was assassinated, right, by a fucking rabid right-wing psychopath. Why was he assassinated? Because he was kickstarting the negotiations process amongst Palestinians and Israelis.
So how do you see this being resolved? Because like I don't really see it being resolved unless one group wipes the other group out.
No,
and I don't
disagree.
want to sound like great. What do you think?
I mean, the greatest example of this is Europe.
Yeah,
The European Union.
you think it's going to be like that?
Well, look at the European Union. These guys were fucking each other's cousins and killing each other for hundreds of years. Like England and France. Okay, they had the 100-Year War. Nazi Germany did the Holocaust, and
that was bad.
And yeah, so much death and destruction. And yet now there's free travel between Eastern Europe and all parts of Europe that you cannot even imagine a world where these guys would be fighting one another. They are constantly collaborating with one another, constantly trading with one another. They have literally the Schengen visa, where you have free travel even before the last iteration of the European Union. So like, we take for granted peace where we see it, without recognizing that these guys literally fucking slaughtered one another in the most barbaric terms for far longer than Israel has been dominating the Palestinian population. So I personally
can't imagine that.
I personally look to history. And recognize that people would much rather collaborate with one another despite their disagreements instead of constantly being at war with one another. And I think we take there. It's not like it's not something that is far-fetched or imaginary. It's something that we're experiencing right now. That's why I use the European Union example. And the same goes for coexistence amongst Israelis and Palestinians. It's just that the dominating force, Israel, has to be brought to heel. And whether that looks like what happened to Nazi Germany, or whether that looks like what happened with the Algerian freedom movement, the FLN, or whether it looks like what happened with apartheid South Africa, is entirely in the hands of the party that has all of the power, Israel. If Israel continues its death and destruction campaign, well, it will probably bring America down with it, most likely because of our undying loyalty and allegiance to Israel's violent endeavors.
Why do you think that America is so fiercely loyal to Israel?
I mean, there's so many. There is the easiest way to describe it is that Israel is a nation state that we basically designed and developed, or at least took over from British colonial rule. And it is an unsinkable aircraft carrier with its own espionage facilities that dishes out our violence that we want to do in the region and test it out at the behest of American imperialism. That gets to be our attack dog. It's an unsinkable aircraft carrier in a resource-rich region that, in a moment's notice, could overtake our more finicky allies, such as Egypt, if there is an issue with like the Suez Canal, for example. That's what Israel's goal is. It secures a trade route, and it also secures, by destabilizing the entire region, it also is an American weapon that you can wield against America's enemies in this resource-rich region at a moment's notice.
I think that you're right. Yeah, true. Well, like, I'm curious because obviously I feel like, do you think that either candidate for president is going to do anything to like improve this? Okay, right. Yeah, of course.
No, I think that it's bad to worse. Like, with the way that like our relationship with Israel is unfolded, Donald Trump did a lot of stuff. And if you ask liberals, they hate Donald Trump. They're so mad at Donald Trump. Donald Trump did a lot of shit in the region, whether it was assassinating Qasem Soleimani, a high-ranking general of the Iranian forces, whether it be ripping apart the Iran denuclearization agreement, which was
the one that died like a dog?
No, that was, I think it was,
was
Baghdadi? But
yes,
anyway,
Baghdadi. There you go.
Yeah.
Sure. No, there's a lot of that.
Yeah. So what that does is destabilizing the region at the behest of Israel's foreign policy goals. the Iran denuclearization agreement being ripped apart was done at the behest of the Israeli government. Okay, I'm going to continue talking to you about this, but I have to pee really bad. I'm going to run this video.
Do too. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, we're doing a pee break.
Yeah, okay.
4 people in the territory bounded by Israel's military.
Okay,
good?
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah,
back.
no, same.
That was the longest piss of my life. Okay.
It's been like 3 hours probably or something like that.
Yeah. What were we talking about?
Fuck. Like, well, basically, like, so I look at it from the perspective that, like, how would you want to see the U.S. like move forward? Because I think that, like, you could, like, we can disagree, like Palestine, like, I don't know what's going to happen if Palestine, this conflict finally ends. My expectation is that I don't think that they're going to, like, become a lot more liberal. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But I hope that I can find out. What do you think would be the way that would happen? How would you like to see the U.S. like approach it?
Oh,
Like,
I mean,
how we
it's
treat
pretty
Israel.
simple. Yeah. In terms of, like, right now, the most significant aspect is, like, reining Israel in and stopping its death and destruction campaign that is seemingly endless. And the easiest way to do that is what American presidents have done in the past, which is one phone call. It is that simple. It's kind of crazy that it is that simple, and yet so much death and destruction is still occurring because we are still the not the junior party in this coalition. We are the people that are allowing Israel to operate in the ways that it wants to.
We are the
if
reason
anything,
why
we're
there's not
goading
a
Israel
ceasefire.
into operating in a certain direction, in a certain way. Like in Lebanon, you have members of the Biden cabinet that told Israel that, like, the time to invade Lebanon was now, that opportunity was ripe. And this is something that, like, obviously
The recent
there
bombings
was a lot of
and everything.
What's up
With the recent bombings you're talking about?
with Lebanon, the invasion of Lebanon. And that's precisely the reason why Joe Biden will turn around and say things like, "Oh, I'm really working tirelessly for a ceasefire," but, like, seemingly no ceasefire exists. Like, it doesn't happen. And then they send another $20 billion of weapons into Israel. Obviously, they're not being honest about their genuine intention here, because in the past, Joe Biden has made one phone call in 2021, for example, and told Israel to cut it out, and they did the next day, because without steady flow of weapons into Israel, Israel would not be able to conduct these violent campaigns because they keep running out of ammunition. That's how much they fucking are bombing. That they don't have the runway
running out of bombs.
Yes. Yeah. They do not have the runway without American intervention. So
if America stopped supporting them, we would have a ceasefire within a week.
Yeah, if America said, you're done, cut it out in one phone call, or no more weapons are coming your way, yes, Israel would have stopped this months ago. Israel would have stopped this yesterday. Israel will stop it tomorrow. So we're not doing that. And I think that a lot of people think about why that is the case. And I guess, like, the smartest analysis that I've encountered, that I've thought about quite a bit, is that we're gearing up for war with China, like a Cold War with China, which is going to be a far harder one to fight, especially given, like, our current position in the global economy, China's current position in the global economy, and the trade relationships that we have and the rest of the planet has with China that did not exist with the USSR last time that Cold War happened. And I think America is trying to basically dominate the region as best as they possibly can, and sick Israel on all of the other regional actors, so that they can, I guess, redefine the maps and reshape the maps in the way that they see fit, so
have,
they can
like,
move on,
imposing power. Yeah, sure.
and so that they can move on to the far graver threat that threatens American hegemonic superpower status, which is China. And that's the reason why they're trying to do, like, this last ditch, before this last hurrah. It's weird to talk about it on these terms, but I think that's precisely what is going on. It's Israel doing, I'll use a German term here, its own Endsieg before they're done. And they're going to do as much territorial acquisition as they possibly can before, before they are restrained by the American government, whether that is the Trump administration or the Kamala Harris administration, who knows? But it will. I think that's what's happening, and they're trying to fucking make sure that they can set up a permanent occupation in at least like the northern Gaza Strip and potentially the entirety of the Gaza Strip, as they will redesign it in the same way that they have in the West Bank, inevitably. But they're just trying to do that to the best of their ability, and obviously that means ethnic cleansing of the entire population, 2.5 million people that live there, ethnic displacement as well.
I think that it's really problematic because I've seen that the behavior of Israel, I think, has really like just multiplied the amount of actual anti-Semitism. Like Adolf has been making a comeback in a big way. It's crazy to see it. Absolutely fucking insane. I see tweets like this every single day. People that are just like openly anti-Semitic or just calling somebody a Jew as like, let's not listen to them at all.
Yeah, but I think it's just underlying anti-Semitism. That underlying anti-Semitism has always existed in America. Yeah. The reason why it's now getting more prominence is one, because like Twitter is a right-wing shithole and Elon Musk doesn't give a fuck or likes that. I mean, he follows like literal Nazi accounts that talk about how like, we must protect like doing the 14 words,
14 like letter. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that that's part of the reason. And the other part of the reason is because like Israel, not dissimilar to ISIS, claims that they're doing this for Judaism, and that they claim falsely that they represent the interests of all Jews around the planet. They say that every Jew is of one mind, that they are monolithic in their understanding of Israel. Everyone is a Zionist. Everyone wants Israel to exist. And everyone wants Israel to exist in the violent ways in which it has to exist as a demographic majority Jewish country. Now, in order to maintain a demographic majority like this, you have to literally sometimes eliminate people that are maybe growing in population size. And Israel can only do this as it maintains a violent apartheid regime in the West Bank and is now rebuild or redesigning Gaza in its own interest in doing full-blown ethnic displacement in Gaza. The problem is they claim that they're doing this for Judaism, and that's just wrong. They're not doing this for Judaism.
Well, they're using it as a tool. That's really what it is.
There is no part of Jewish culture or Jewish theology that or a theological understanding that says that like Israel has to exist in this way that it does. As a matter of fact, there is actually a theological understanding under Judaism that Jews cannot have a nation state until the Messiah comes back. So that's the reason why you see so many of these like ultra-Orthodox Jews in pro-Palestinian demonstrations that are side by side with the Palestinians criticizing the state of Israel.
It's like blasphemy.
Yeah, there are a shit ton of anti-Zionist Jews that are prominent members of the resistance against Israel. I have Jewish fans in Israel who are anti-Zionist living in Israel, and I analyze that in the same way that I analyze my own existence in America. I do not agree with American imperialism. I think it's awful, and I work every day to try to get others to recognize that reality. And having said that, the most prominent displays of Israel and the most prominent defenses of Israel are always in mainstream media, are always associated with Judaism. That's why you hear the likes of Jake Tapper and many other anchors, for example, say criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic. I can't believe that you're an anti-Zionist. You're anti-Semitic. You want Israel to be destroyed. You want all the Jews that live in Israel to die. This is false, and it's a smear, and it no longer works. But because Israel is constantly portraying itself as a Jewish state, and because Israel constantly claims that they're doing all this,
I think that there's that. That's also a very big component. There is the moral authority, like we're killing you for your own good.
Yeah. So because they're doing this, and because they're using religion as a justification, I mean, what are people to assume? Especially if you've never been around a Jewish person, and you've maybe heard that like, oh, Jews control the media. Like someone just said that, right? In your vicinity, and you internalize that, or you heard that, and then you see Jake Tapper being like, Israel's doing this for Judaism, and if you look at this carnage and don't think that it's unacceptable, then you yourself are anti-Semitic. Yeah, if you're a guy living in fucking Arkansas, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, maybe Jews do control the media, and that's how anti-Semitism grows in the Western in Western society. There's already an underlying always endless amount of anti-Semitism that people think about on a day-to-day basis, but this gives them justification. And a lot of charlatans take advantage of the situation to promote anti-Semitic conspiracies because they care more about shitting on Jewish people than actually criticizing the state of Israel.
Oh, I see that a lot. A lot of people that are against Israel in quotes, but every person that's a Jew is Israeli in some way. Yeah, no, I think it's very common.
It's the same argument on both sides, and that's what's really interesting about it, because the difference between Jake Tapper saying all Jews are Zionist and therefore criticizing Israel as anti-Semitic is no different than a Nazi saying all Jews are Zionist and therefore, Israel is the Jewish state and they want to fucking destroy Israel. There is no difference in the fundamentals of that argument. Both sides, whether they are woke or not woke on the issue, still think that all Jews are Zionist.
Man, isn't that something?
Yeah.
I don't know what, I think that it's so fucking annoying and weird that it plays that big of a role in conversations because we have people that can't afford healthcare. I think it's ridiculous.
Yes.
I'm very disappointed about it, but what do you do, right?
Yes, but also
Go ahead.
something to remember, something to consider is that regardless of what people say, I mean, this is why I don't consider criticism of Saudi Arabia to be inherently Islamophobic. There's a difference, however. Like criticizing Saudi Arabia for doing a genocide in Yemen, or criticizing Saudi Arabia for, again, being a sovereign nation state that is at the heel of the United States of America, that is a willing participant of American empire, therefore is not politically constrained in similar ways that like other forces that are dominated by American empire, still maintaining, some aspects of religious theocracy in their own governance, is an appropriate criticism of Saudi Arabia. You can do that without saying Muslims are, exhibiting an inferior culture. You could say that about the UAE. You could say that about many of these other countries, whether it's Qatar or UAE or Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the like. That's the difference between, monolithizing the entirety of the region versus individually dissecting the many ways in which some of our allies in the region are engaging in religious fundamentalism in their internal governance.
It's awful, man. Like it's shocking to me that so many people buy into it and so many people still do it. Like I am amazed. Like here in the U.S., it feels like people are becoming more religious. I think that people over there, you don't think so?
No, absolutely not.
I think religion's been coming back a lot recently.
No, I don't think so. I look at overall trends. I look at overall trends. Like it's more in your face with like people being like, "Oh, I love religion" or whatever. But no, overall trends show that religious support is hemorrhaging in all of our religious institutions in this country. It's something that like people are genuinely fearful of, at least those in power, those who stand to gain. But no, American religiosity has gone down tremendously. And that trend is the same everywhere around the world, as a matter of fact. The only places where it's not the same, the only places where like there are more religious people or more fundamentalist people are oftentimes areas of conflict, like areas that are in direct conflict, areas that are being dominated. In those places, like
people
even
use
if there
religion
is
as a cultural rallying point, I think that's what happens, and then they use the religion to have a, like this is like how you're establishing the values. Because I mean, the truth is, right? Like you are going to have your like a culture is going to be like we are more influenced by like let's say Christianity than China is or than Saudi Arabia is, right? We're like
China's not religious at all.
Exactly, right? And so like that's what I'm saying. And so like, of course, there's going to be like a relation there. And so that it makes sense why people would use that, but there's a lot of misuse of it. I don't think that religion's like bad, like entirely, but I feel like a lot of people use it as a weapon. And
Absolutely. No, that's the way I see
what
it.
really, and that's what really scares me the most. And it scares me a lot with like, I mean, you know, we went through like 20 years of this with like George Bush and like Obama with the, you know, this like the Middle Eastern adventures, right? Of like, you know, George Bush saying that God told him that like he was supposed to go over there. It's fucking insane, absolutely batshit crazy. And so I just I am very, very like afraid of that. I'm very worrisome of that, and that's where I think a lot of my distrust comes from with like any sort of culture that prioritizes religion as like a cultural like you know, rallying point. Is that I just feel like a lot of the ideas that they have are really bad.
Yeah. So I don't disagree with religious fundamentalism on principle. I agree that it is a bad thing, and there is never a moment where I've said that like religious fundamentalism is appropriate. I just simply recognize that it is nowhere near the most devastating aspect of like any kind of society if they are currently in the process of being wiped out. That's just my analysis on it. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll give you this. I think Israel's worse than Palestine. How about that? Is that good?
I mean, yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I mean, far worse in terms of what kind of power it has, because
Sure.
I think we understand, right, that if you are like, if I'm 6'4", 225 pounds on a good day, okay.
Yep.
If I were to go and beat the shit out of kindergartners, like, I would be held responsible. If a kindergartner in the process punched me back and I said, ow, you hit me, now I'm going to go beat the shit out of your family members with my, and maybe even use my guns on them, you'd be like, this man is a monster, put him in jail immediately, right?
Sure.
Yeah, but when Israel does it, and you turn around and you go, what about the vibes of those kindergartners, though? Did they deserve it? Maybe they do deserve it. Maybe they had some bad opinions. Maybe they called him Baldy or something. Then obviously it would be seen as like even if I was interested or not interested, even if I could recognize right from wrong, it would come across to onlookers that I was like justifying some of the some of the things that the much larger party in this circumstance, me, did to the kindergartners.
I really hope that Palestine can be free. But I don't think that I don't think it's going to go the way you think it will. I don't.
What do you mean?
I think that with continuing to control people with like religious fundamentalism, I think that's going to continue. I don't think that the moment that like they get out from under Israel, they're going to just like be okay with all of these other types of like identities. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But
that's never happened, is what I'm trying to tell you. Like that's never even been able to be implemented in terms of like Palestinian history. So much so that there's never been a moment in Palestinian history where there's like any sort of sovereignty. So we can't make that we can't make that assumption, because that has never even throughout Palestinian history ever existed.
I agree with you. And I think that I have an assumption. I think you also probably have an assumption. But I think that we both agree that it would be good to find out who's right.
I mean, sure, but once again, regardless of there's two different things that I want to make very clear here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Regardless of whether Palestinian people will, let's say tomorrow, Palestine is emancipated and they have full-blown sovereignty, and they decide to be religiously like very right-wing, very fundamentalist. I still think that is infinitely better than the current genocide that is going on. Would you agree with that?
Is it better? Well, I mean, like, if they're going in there and they're killing other people instead, I could see arguments for being...
No. I'm saying like they are being very restrictive towards gay Palestinians. Let's say tomorrow Palestine is a sovereign state, and as a sovereign state tomorrow they're no longer being genocided, and in the when they are rebuilding Palestine as a sovereign nation state, they are very homophobic, they're very transphobic, they're like really harming gay people and trans people in Palestine. They're like arresting them. I still think that while still inappropriate, would be a far greater outcome than being completely wiped out and being completely genocided. I don't think that is going to be the outcome, but regardless, I want to make it very clear. I think that yes, no genocide is better than any kind of genocide.
We're not making a genocide tier list. I get that. I understand. My point is that I agree with you. I just don't think that I don't like their culture either, right? I find it to be problematic as well. And that's why I struggle. By the way,
the people that we were talking about in terms of Palestinians are like, they are some of the most educated per capita population in spite of everything else, just for the record. Like, I don't know if you knew this or not, but Palestinians are literally some of the most educated people on the planet, like per capita.
I hope so. I mean,
I hope so. I mean, there's like,
sorry,
Palestinian educational attainment is in spite of being genocided by Israel, in spite of like living under Israeli occupation, is incredibly high. They have a tremendous amount of obviously a tremendous amount of struggles and tremendous amount of hurdles to go through, but the status of education in Palestine is that 96.3% of the population is literate. It's higher than like the high human development category average, as in Palestinian society as a whole is like has a higher literacy rating than developed nations.
That's really good. That's great.
Yeah. So like, I don't think that these are the religious fundamentalist people that you think that they are, is what I'm trying to explain.
I don't think that I think there were a lot of people that were religious and also very well educated that can do very bad things. I don't think that, like,
for sure,
the more educated you are, like, I see what you're saying, and I think that you definitely do have an argument with it.
Do you understand why like cultural inferiority arguments end up like leading you astray in this subject matter? Because now that I've told you the literacy rate being higher in Palestine in the Palestinian population, now you're saying, well, they can be literate and still fundamentalist, but like,
well, yeah,
there isn't evidence of this reality of like broad sweeping fundamentalism in Palestinian existence at all. If you are pointing to Hamas, which is a Islamist fundamentalist organization that started off as a charity that became this like violent resistance group, in terms of their governance, if that's what you're pointing to, once again, the situation is very different for the broader Palestinian society, because that is the only group that has successfully been able to thwart Israeli incursions, further Israeli incursions. That is the reason why they are the domineering group. Israel killed all the fucking secular leadership so consistently, or turned it into, like the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, turned it into its own security apparatus, but with a Palestinian face. So from the calculation of the Palestinians, they're like, okay, these guys are fucking, these guys are religious, but they're also the only people defending us.
It's the devil, you know. I understand the
It's
argument.
not even the devil. They see it as like, these are the only people that are fighting back against the country that is, bombing my house.
I understand that. And I can see their point of view. I just think that they're still bad. I do. I think it's bad to prosecute people and to kill them based off of their identity.
Okay, there's no disagreement. There's no disagreement with what you're saying.
Of course.
The difference, however, is that again,
Go ahead.
Palestinian internal governance has always existed within the confines of being a colonial entity. They have never had full-blown sovereignty, so their internal affairs have to always be analyzed. Well, one, Palestinians are not of one mind, right? So that's number one. And number two is that we are talking about, especially if we're talking about the Gaza Strip, we're talking about people that are majority underage. Majority. The majority of the Gaza Strip is under the age of 18. So, like, we're talking about killing teenagers for the most part. We're talking about killing kids because that's what's going on. So, like, their internal governance or what has happened in Palestinian society, it bears no basis in the outcome. Israel's killing them whether they are gay. Israel's killing them whether they're straight or whether they're fundamentalists or not. Palestinians could be the wokest, okay? Palestinians could be making fucking video games with like only trans representation, and Israel would still be killing them, okay? That's the reason why it doesn't matter in this conversation whether they would engage in any sort of like internal governance post-emancipation that is like homophobic or not.
I think that it really, I think that they should be able to make that decision themselves, right? Like, if they want to do that, that's fine. Like, I mean, they're a sovereign nation, or they should be a sovereign nation. They should be able to do that. I just don't like the cultural equivalency. I do actually think that these cultures are, in a lot of cases, worse. And I think that there are a lot of points of difference there, whether it's about how you can speak up against the government, how you can resist different types of control.
But there is no government. Like, you're again. Remember what I told you about like the Espionage Act during World War II and like during Cold War, all of these like laws that were created to dominate American people for having a difference in opinion.
Sure, but all those are bad. Like, that's
I understand,
my point, though,
but
right?
it's because it was born out of necessity in the minds of those who were responsible for the government. You yourself are in at odds with that, but ultimately you still said, maybe because you didn't know this, you still said that like America is a far superior culture. The point is, it has nothing to do with like. The point is, it has nothing to do with like a culture at all, and everything to do with the material conditions that you're subjected to. That's my argument, and that at least throughout history, societies that have been allowed to foster, allowed to prosper, have inevitably had these struggles that are born out of a genuine need for people that want equality. And that's it. That's the reason why. And there's always going to be resistance from others inside of said societies every step of the way. But in order for you to analyze this, you have to look at Palestinians in the same exact way that you look at your fellow Americans, because there is no difference. Ultimately, they're still, at the end of the day, they're still human beings. And some of them are gay, some of them are trans, and they all want equality. They all want a fucking job. They all want shelter. And they all, want to play WoW Classic over retail.
Right. I of course, I agree with you about all of those things, except for I don't know if all of them want equality. I do think that some of those people do actually hold very regressive views, the same as the way that we have people.
That's what I mean. Right? But you have to, you have to analyze broader Palestinian society in the exact same way. With that, the moment that you are equipped with the understanding that they are no different than Americans, okay? Some are going to be restrictive. Some are going to believe fucking insane shit. Some are going to believe insane shit in the other direction. Like some are going to want to make Concord again, okay? Some Palestinians are going to be like, I want to make Concord, but more gay.
Yeah.
Okay? And that is just the reality. That
might be happening.
There are people with a diversity of opinion. They're no different than you and I in terms of their needs, in terms of like the way, in terms of what they want for themselves. And that friction is always going to exist in every society. And when you are no longer shackled by the restrictions of existing under a colonial occupation, you will be able to move society forward by fighting. There's going to be struggles. There's always going to be struggles every step of the way. But you have to understand that America was able to get to this point after years and years of a lot of revolutionary figures fighting for it. And Palestinians have never had that opportunity because they've always been dominated by a far, far greater military force. And that force has surveilled every aspect of their lives. That force has dominated every aspect of their lives. I'll give you one example, like in terms of queer phobia, right?
Sure.
Israel literally will blackmail gay Palestinians. They will try to create sexual material, okay, of gay Palestinians in an effort to turn them into confidential informants for the state of Israel. Like, that's not exactly very pro-gay, is it? It's not.
Oh, Israel's awful. Yeah, for sure.
No,
like,
but that's my point.
Definitely.
Ultimately, just like Israeli bombs do not make a distinction between gay Palestinians and straight Palestinians who are homophobic or whatever. Like, at the end of the day, these guys have never been able to get to a point where they have any sort of civil governance whatsoever, so they can rebel against it internally. But remember, it's always the people that are still Palestinians that will be rebelling against whatever form of governance they inevitably create, if they are ever to be free.
It's hard to say. I mean, like, my expectations of things changing massively are very low. I think that what you're saying could be true, and I hope that we can find out. But I don't know, man. I mean, I don't see how it just changes in like that big way. I don't see it happening.
What are you talking about? Like the full-scale genocide and ethnic cleansing of
no
of the Palestinians, or are you talking about Palestinians becoming
well,
like
I was referring to
pro-queer?
Palestinians, like, becoming more like like liberal, I guess you would say, right? And not having these like cultural like expectations, because I feel like, kind of like by what you were saying, right, is like blackmailing gay Palestinians. Well, why is it a blackmail, right? Well, because they can be punished and hurt for having those viewpoints. And so that's at least like my opinion on it. I don't know. I don't like that culture. I do think that to a certain degree, every individual person is going to be different. But if you're looking at what a government does, in the same way that people criticize like America and they're really criticizing the government, I think you can criticize Palestine or Saudi Arabia or any other country. And
I'm letting you know once again, there's no aspect of Palestinian quote unquote culture that revolves around like dominating gay Palestinians or anything like that.
So do you think that, like, at a certain point, where do you, if it doesn't come from there, where did it come from?
What do you mean, homophobia in general?
Yeah, where did it come
I think that, yes, I think that religious social conditioning plays a role in uplifting bigoted attitudes towards people that are I know, but it's no different. The problem here is that aspect of it is reactionary conservatism. It's no different in Palestine as it is in the United States of America. The only reason why it manifests, or the only reason why it takes it can be dealt with by those in terms of like the civil governance or anything like that is specifically a direct consequence of being a victim of colonial domination. And those guys are the ones that happen to be fighting back against Israel tooth and nail. But once again, it doesn't matter. Just like I celebrate the American accomplishments in World War II, it doesn't change that dynamic that America was incredibly homophobic back then. You know what I mean?
They were. True.
It was. They were murking. And they, by the way, America still has gay panic laws and things of that nature that allows people to be able to potentially kill their partners. I mean, let's see what the Let's see what the latest is on the gay panic, trans panic defense bans now.
Oh, I'm sure there's all kinds of like stupid stuff like
yeah,
that
and,
for sure.
under no circumstance, under no
worse.
circumstance would I ever advocate or say
Absolutely.
like, well, America
Right.
is an inferior culture, and that's why like.
Well, I think that aspect of our culture is inferior. I do. I think it is inferior. I think it's worse. And I think that I think we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. We should hold everybody to a higher standard. I don't really see how like being a developing country, like I don't see the correlation between, you know, if a country is like being occupied or something like that, that like that's going to make them more homophobic. I don't really see how.
Wait,
that's,
how do you
like,
not see that? Well, it's entirely it's not even being occupied. You understand, right? Like it's
well, whatever
it's
word
what
you want to use.
it's what
right?
material
like,
conditions
genocide.
look like when you are occupied.
Mhm.
That's why I gave the example of the Westboro Baptist Church. Those guys are not doing ISIS style executions of gay people because they live in America. If they were born and living in another part of the world, and if they were living in America, I guess like post-nuclear Holocaust or something, they would absolutely be doing that. It's entirely about what your immediate surroundings look like. That's my point. That's it. They're exhibiting the same kind of religious fundamentalism. The only difference is there is no like greater outside force that is like destroyed the United States of America in its entirety, and therefore they can just like fucking fulfill their violent desires whichever way they see fit. That's the only difference here.
It's very hard to know like what somebody would do if they were born into another like another country, right? It's like would people in Palestine?
That's why I said they would be teleported, like with the same and with the same exact mentality. There is no way. There is, of course, and that, my friend, is you recognizing that we are a product of our material conditions.
Oh,
what you just said right there.
Extent. Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's it. That's my point. Like that is precisely what I'm saying.
I can see what you're saying. And I think that definitely that does play a part. But I think that also a culture is created by a government. And you can look at the way the government applies any sort of rules. And I think that it is very easy to say that some rules are unfair and they are inferior to others. I do not think this is a problematic thing to say. And I don't like the idea of the cultural relativity. I don't think that that really exists in a lot of cases. And I feel like, yes, of course, you're going to have people that will take advantage of, oh, well, this asshole warlord guy is coming in and he's going to, you know, save us, but he's also a bad person. Yes, of course that's going to happen, right? But at the same time, I don't think that's the only point of it. I think that if you do have a law, and then also while that warlord is in charge, that culture, that warlord or that group of people that is bad, while that's around, is inferior. Now, I feel like a lot of this is about like the inferiority thing. To me, the word isn't really that important. It's mainly just like there are ideas that I think are just objectively worse. Like, for example, like not letting people express their identity for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just an objectively worse viewpoint, and anybody who is trying to champion that viewpoint is a bad person. It's just you're doing a bad thing, and there's like no justification for it. There's no like I can see people that like don't actively fight against it because like you know for whatever reason, right? There could be 50 different reasons, but I do think it's always bad. It's bad every single time, and
yes, I think suppression of people's suppression of people's like expression is not a good thing. Yes, it is a bad thing. But again, there is a difference between doing it in a developed nation that does not have like any sort of outside forces dominating it versus a country that has never even been allowed to be a country.
Well, here's the way I see it.
Would you say that there is not a distinction there? Like, would you say that?
I don't see a correlation between. I don't understand the correlation between suppressing gay people and being able to be like another country that's like involving you. Like I don't, or like attacking you.
I will describe this once again.
Okay.
African tribal existence, okay, and their internal affairs played no basis in chattel slavery, although it was used as a justification for it, that these were barbaric people, that these were not even human. Do you want this? Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, but it was bad, right? I mean, like what they were doing there was
Like,
still
would
bad.
you-
It doesn't justify the bad behavior. No,
Okay,
I don't think it's justified. No.
But ultimately, there is still a far greater evil here, which is robbing people of their homes and stripping them away. You know, mass rapes, mass subjugation, humiliation, chattel slavery. So when historians look to this, when historians look at chattel slavery, they don't analyze the conditions of African tribes unless they are a different kind of historian that may or may not be trying to justify chattel slavery. And the same goes for any kind of colonial domination. Some of these opinions are more permissible in polite society than others. The reason why I'm using chattel slavery is because everybody recognizes right from wrong.
Yeah, sure.
Like South Africa, apartheid South Africa, the idea that black people were inferior in apartheid South Africa, I'm sure people probably made similar. I know for a fact that they made similar arguments in apartheid South Africa, where they were like, well, black people are, you know, violent and barbaric. And why do you care about this one little country of South Africa just because it's being controlled by white people? Like, but when black people came into power, okay, when apartheid South Africa, when the apartheid was lifted and they came into power, obviously there was still an economic apartheid, but the notion that they were going to be barbaric did not occur at all. The idea that they were going to be dominating and barbaric and inferior in their governance, that did not happen.
I don't see why, like, why is it so hard to just acknowledge that certain things that people do are bad? Like, it's really not. It's not complicated.
I'm acknowledging that religious fundamentalism is bad. I'm also telling you that it plays no role in the far greater evil, because the difference between killing 10 gay people and killing 100,000 gay people is killing 100,000 gay people is worse, right?
Well, yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, then that's the point. That's the point I'm making, which is that Israel is killing not only 100,000 gay people, but just every fucking straight person as well. They don't care who they're killing. And that is the reason why I don't spend a lot of time being like, well, the Palestinians have never actually shown me that they deserve emancipation because they're not like super woke about gay people.
Yeah.
It bears no basis in this. Like, I don't care.
I don't want to see
when I analyze the situation in World War II, I don't look at like, you know, the way that like how German Jews thought about, like, what German Jews thought about like gay people. I don't really care.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. To me, I think that it's very easy to just acknowledge that certain things are bad. Like, for example, like if they're treating people this way, it is a bad thing, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that they should be killed for it, right? Of course not.
Yeah, and they're not being killed for it anyway. That's just like, that is only the justification that Israel tries to use whenever people are countering this kind of argument with like, hey man, genocide is wrong, and they'll be like, oh well, Israel would kill you if you, Palestine would kill you if you were gay in Gaza. Which, by the way, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a very famous video of a trans activist that went to Gaza and literally engaged in humanitarian aid in Gaza. And obviously they were not like, oh, you're trans, we're going to kill you. They were like, oh, thank you for your fucking humanitarian aid. They don't give a shit. Like, it's the same as any other kind of person. I talked to a teenager from Yemen, okay, who everyone called, myself included, called Timothy Charlemagne or Chalamet.
Is that the One Piece one?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now this kid is like, I think he was like 19 at the time when I talked to him, which means that for most of his life, he has withstood genocide, right? Like he is a person whose only experience is like, it's literally like talking to fucking Anne Frank, basically. Okay, being able to talk to Anne Frank in real time. That's all he's known is death and destruction of his home, right? With American bombs.
But he's not getting killed by gay people, right? He's not getting killed. Like if he's talking about like
we're not even talking about gay people. I'm going to bring up something important here. First of all, he wasn't Houthi. I asked him. He was like, I'm not. Which many people said, oh, he's hiding it. He's PR trained, which is really funny to say about like some random fucking dude who can't even speak English. Like he doesn't give a fuck if people call him anti-Semitic. And I asked him, like, what do you think about Jewish people? What if I were to tell you that like Jewish people are leading the anti-Zionist movement in America? And he was like, that's great. I love them. That's awesome. Anyone who's against Israel is my friend. Now, that might have been one of the first instances where this person ever even heard that Jewish people were against the state of Israel. Okay? But his immediate reaction was, right? his immediate reaction was, that's great. Love that. I'm a big fan of that. Something along those lines. And the reason for that is because there is a far greater problem that people care about. And that is Israel's complete domination over the region, America's complete domination by way of utilizing Israel over the region. That's all they care about. If that was removed from the equation, okay, these people, some of them would absolutely be right-wing. Some of them would absolutely be like, oh, no, I still don't I don't fuck with gay people. Fuck those guys. I want to kill them. And other people would say, I'm gay. I fought alongside you. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's just how human beings are. That's just how that's how society ends up evolving to a point that we take for granted. That becomes more understanding. It's not easy.
I think that's what happens over time. It is, but I think it's easy to say that where it is right now isn't good. It's not good. Yeah. And of course, only
if you recognize like where this hostility stems from or why it's left unexamined. Rather, the hostility that we assume these people have, because like the reason why I asked him about the like Jewish anti-Zionists was because even my assumption is that like the Houthis, for example, literally have a banner that says "Curse the Jews," right?
Yeah.
Like, so I was very curious as to see like how this person would react to something that he might not have even ever considered, and that's the point, which is that like, people have the capacity to change once they learn new information. They're not ever going to be firmly planted and be of one mind. Most people have a tendency to be empathetic to other people. They want to collaborate with other people. We're a social animal. It's in our nature to be as collaborative with others as possible. And that's why I don't believe that anyone is like intrinsically homophobic or intrinsically queerphobic. Not that it matters in this circumstance, because the far larger problem is still always going to be genocide.
Yeah, no, I could see the genocide being worse. Yeah, sure. I could definitely see that. I don't like the I don't like the idea that culture is equivalent to ours. I think it is very problematic. I think it's very bad. I don't think it should be judged the same way. It doesn't mean I'm not sympathetic to them. Of course, right? Of course it's bad this happens. But whenever there is a state that's upholding something that is killing groups of people based off of their identity, or a group of people that's doing that, whether it's a government or some sort of like regime or anything like that, I think it's very easy to say that that's bad. I don't think that saying that, like different types of persecution is for one reason or another, like, okay, because they're being being occupied in some way or another, right? I don't really see how these two things are related, because they're not being occupied by gay people. They're not being occupied by trans people. They're being occupied by Israelis. So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
like if you're,
which is why they're
if
not
you're
like,
hating gay people and you're making
but
that against the
but
law,
no,
has
that's
nothing to do
a good
with it.
point, Asmon. That's a good point.
Yeah.
That's why they're not like, if you think right now or at any point, Hamas
Yeah.
is like, we really got to fucking deal with these homosexuals in our ranks. Like, you're out of your mind. That's not what's going on at all.
I don't think that's the case at all. Of course not.
Okay, so
But when the dust
you know,
settles, when the dust settles, and then they start killing gay people, what are you gonna say?
okay, but you can't hypothesize a future where they're gonna do that when there is no fucking like evidence that they're going to do that in a free and a completely emancipated sovereign nation state. That's what my point. The assumption that they're gonna do that is the bigotry. That is where we're at odds. The assumption that they're gonna do that immediately. It almost feels like they want to be free just so they can kill the gay Palestinians, which is a ridiculous fucking assumption.
Not. Of course, that's not the reason.
Okay, but that is. But you understand that, like,
free to kill all the gay people. Of course not. But like, I mean, it's an openly stated thing with a lot of these cases, even inside of any sort of other culture. There are many cultures that are openly stated to be against people of different gender identities. This isn't some sort of like unique, monopoly that Palestine has over this. I think it's true in many cases.
But Palestine has never. But given the fact that there has never been a sovereign national Palestinian state, making this inference is ridiculous. Is my point. It's like saying that if Texas were to exist on its own, that they would start fucking executing gay people and enslave black people again. Except there has been a state, or it wasn't a sovereign state, but there has been an instance where, Texas did actually fight hard to enslave black people and continue to enslave black people. That's why we have Juneteenth, which is far after the point of abolition, where they still maintain the practice of chattel slavery. So even then, there's more evidence that Texas might potentially do that, as opposed to Palestinian statehood, which has never been a form of governance that has had a moment to behave in the homophobic ways in which we assume they will. And ultimately, once again, they would still be dominating gay Palestinians. And this is a concept that a lot of Americans don't understand. They think like, a lot of people used to say this about ISIS. They're like, oh, they're throwing gay people off the roofs because Muslims are so Islamophobic. I'm like, bitch, the gay people are Muslim. Like, who do you think they're throwing off the roofs? They're not throwing white American gays off the roofs. They're throwing Muslims. They're throwing other Arabs that are gay off the roofs, which is like, something that is at odds with the way that people understand, Islam and the Muslim world, and think like, no, all Muslims love this shit. It's like, well, I don't think the gay dude who is Muslim loved being thrown off the roof. I think he probably hated that in that moment.
I bet he did. I think so. You're right, and I think that criticism of that isn't really Islam. I don't think it really has a lot to do with Islam, right?
It has nothing to do with Islam, and it has nothing to do with culture in general. It has everything to do with this like fucking insane, militant, rabid, psychopathic colonial apparatus that was trying to restore the image of the caliphate in whatever they saw fit.
The way that people see gender identity and the way that they treat them is absolutely part of their culture. And it's part of our culture too. It's part of everybody's culture.
It's not necessarily true. I don't think when you say it's a part of their culture, you make it seem like it is an intractable quality. It's a quality that cannot change, or it's a quality that definitely exists across the board as a monolithic force. That is not the case. That's my point.
Of course, nothing's monolithic, right? Nothing is ever going to be monolithic. The same within the US or anything like that. But I think it's a viewpoint that a lot of people have, and it's the same as here. There's a lot of people that have viewpoints about that here. And guess what? Our laws reflect the viewpoints that a lot of people have. And so what's going to happen in Palestine? I don't know. When they get independent,
I don't think our laws reflect a lot of the people's viewpoints. Because if that was the case, you wouldn't have been so shocked about Texas BDS laws. Like, I don't think it's your viewpoint. I think if you were to sit down every person in Texas, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is unacceptable.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right about that. I mean, there are some of them that get through. You are right. But I do think that in general, the laws do have a rough estimation to what the people's values are.
I don't, like, not again, we're talking about abortion bans, for example. Abortion bans. That's not the viewpoint of the overwhelming majority of people that are now subjected to abortion bans. Governments do not operate at the behest of their citizens, even in democracies, even in quote unquote theoretical democracies like the United States of America. So no, that is not the case. And people always are fighting against their governments in order to, at the domestic level, get the equality that they fight long and hard for. The problem, however, with Palestinian society is that they've never had a fucking functioning sovereign state and a government to begin with. And even if they did, the assumption that they would be homophobic is ridiculous because, once again, there is no historical reference point for this. And beyond that,
well, isn't it
even
against
if they
the law
did have
now?
a homophobic government,
it's against the law now, right?
But even if they had a homophobic government, it's against the law is meaningless in this circumstance. What is the law? There has never been a sovereign state in this situation. Palestinians, like I said, in Gaza are operated under Hamas rule, right? Palestinians in Gaza are operated under Hamas rule. Palestinian Authority legalized gay marriage decades before then. But in 2005, Hamas rule came into power after America tried to implement voting. Okay, George W. Bush on his way out was like, well, let's do voting in Palestine. Palestinian Authority said, let's not do that. We are not ready for it. We'll get fucking owned. Because at that point, Palestinian people, both in the West Bank and certainly in the Gaza Strip, were viewing the Palestinian Authority as exactly what it is, a CIA-backed institution that was working at the behest of the Israeli state as a part of its security apparatus. So they were very unpopular. So what happened? Hamas came in and we're like, we're Muslim as fuck. We love Islam. We are honest because of our Islamic background. And we are the only group that is actually violently resisting against the Israeli apartheid. We are going to run a anti-corruption campaign, which is what they did. And just like the prediction of the Fatah party, which is the secular party, which is the part of the Palestinian Authority, they were right. Hamas did win. Then America said, let's do a fucking coup d'etat. Fuck it. Take over the Strip regardless. Hamas actually won that battle. And basically the rest is history. They have, been the de facto government.
Don't you think the fact they won the vote matters? Like if the people are voting for the people that want to oppress people based off of their identity, I think that to a certain extent, that does infer a degree of like what people think.
I have two problems here. I just told you that 50% of the population of Palestine and the Gaza Strip is under the age of 18. None of them fucking voted for Hamas, okay? Because they weren't alive. That's number one. Number two, you said you voted for Donald Trump in the past, in 2016.
I did.
Okay, why did you vote for Donald Trump?
I just didn't really like Hillary Clinton.
There you go. Turns out people have many different motivations for voting for one particular party over the other, and it doesn't have to be Islamist fundamentalism that they believe in. So that's my point. Because they're human beings with a shit ton of different attitudes and different opinions. If they see the dominating party of Fatah as a party that is completely captured by Israeli security apparatus that is working at the behest of this state that is destroying their lives, they're going to be like, okay, I'm going to go with the other guy, just like you went with Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. So, but it doesn't even matter because most of those people that fucking voted for Hamas are dead. They don't even exist anymore. And it doesn't matter because Hamas is still the governing party because there's not a real democracy there. They are a militant force that is dominating the Gaza Strip that is simultaneously fighting against the Israeli state. So I hope that this helps clear your understanding of the way in which Palestinians live in the Gaza Strip and how this has nothing to do with their internal affairs or their government. Or how they view the world or how they view gay people at all.
I get it. I think that, and I do hope that they get their independence. I think that whenever they do, they're probably going to do the same thing that Hamas did to gay people before.
No, they were not. But I told you that. Hold on, let's look this up real quick.
Go ahead.
Like, if that was the case, which is such a funny argument that we're having over like a group of individuals that are being genocided anyway. Like, I don't give a fuck if they literally were straight up jailing every homosexual person in the Gaza Strip. I still think that the genocide is inappropriate and completely unjustifiable. But yes.
Well, two things can be bad, right?
What?
Two things can be bad. It's not like only one thing can be bad. Like, obviously, it's bad to do that.
West Bank, it's been legal technically since the annexation, but since 1951, they adopted the Jordanian Penal Code of 1951 in the West Bank. Shortly after the Jordanian annexation of the West Bank in 1950, same-sex acts were decriminalized across the territory with the adoption of the Jordanian Penal Code. So it's been decriminalized in in the West Bank. And
Let me
before then,
find it.
what?
Oh, go ahead.
And before then, it was it was first the Ottoman law, which was decriminalized in the 18th century, and then after that, it was British law. So on the 18th of September 1936, the Criminal Code of Mandatory Palestine, British Mandate Criminal Code, which drew from the Ottoman law or English law, was enacted, which meant that sodomy is illegal. What? I'm looking at the LGBTQ rights of Palestine on Wikipedia.
Okay.
So yeah.
It's considered a taboo subject. People experience persecution and violence. I mean, I feel like
of course.
That's kind of bad, right? I mean, like, yeah, for sure.
No. I think understand. I'm just simply stating that, like, it's more complicated than the way you presented it, though.
Of course,
don't you think?
Everything is always more complicated. Yeah. Of course, it's more complicated. And if I have a clip that is 30 seconds long, obviously that nuance is not going to be communicated. Of course not. Yeah. But all I'm saying is,
and ultimately, they will get to a place of being more open-minded to gay people once they have the opportunity to be free, to be a sovereign nation, and then their gay neighbors, their gay peers, their queer peers are able to fight their own civil rights movement, like our queer peers did back in the day in the United States of America.
Just like they did in Saudi Arabia.
But ultimately, homosexual activity is legal in the West Bank.
It's better than not. But all I'm saying is that I don't think this exists on a spectrum.
But don't you think that like, like there are still, like, for example, here in the Wikipedia page, it says, in August 2019, the Palestinian National Authority announced that LGBT groups were forbidden to meet in the West Bank on the grounds that they are harmful to the higher values of ideal Palestinian society. This was in response to a conference in Nablus by Al-Qaws, the Palestinian LGBTQ group. Following the backlash, the ban was later withdrawn. So people in a place where they are at least able to organize against the limited government that exists in the West Bank, literally actively advocated against this, and then they took back the ban. On October 2022, Palestinian police arrested a suspect who beheaded a 25-year-old male Palestinian, Ahmad Abu Murkiya, who was seeking asylum in Israel because he was gay. At the time, it was reported that 90 Palestinians who identified with the LGBT community lived as asylum seekers in Israel. Now, notice how, once again, they are prosecuting people who are killing gay people. Well, yeah. Why would they do that if they were also invested in killing gay people? It happens. There are still gay people who get assassinated, murdered in the United States of America. They are dealt with through a criminal code. They are dealt with through a civil governance, right? They're dealt with within the confines of our court structure. They're prosecuted. They're thrown in jail. Sometimes. Other times, we still have gay panic laws, despite the fact that we are supposed to be this superior culture. People do still get away with killing gay people in the United States of America, as I was showing you earlier, in at least how many states? The so-called gay panic defenses are legal strategies which, according to the American Bar Association... I feel like it obviously can't be that good if people are leaving and they're looking for asylum in Israel either. I feel like to say that like they're not doing anything about it, people wouldn't be going and getting asylum in Israel. It says right there in the same paragraph that this time it was reported 90 Palestinians who identified the LGBT lived in asylum as asylum seekers in Israel. Why would they be doing that if they're being treated equally? They wouldn't need to. First, why are they? I have a couple different reasons for why they're doing that. Do you feel like if you had the opportunity to not be under colonial rule, you'd rather go to Israel? Israel is not exactly a tolerant society for LGBTQ either, by the way. You can't get gay married in Israel. It's still illegal to get gay married in Israel to this day. Why were they going there? Because the material conditions are obviously better there inside of Israel. If you are a part of a regular Israeli society, if you are able to seek asylum, Israel can then turn around and use that as a brownie point for themselves. Or half the time, the gay Palestinians that are executed are also collaborating with the Israeli government because they've been blackmailed prior to their collaboration.
Well, they wouldn't need to be getting blackmailed if the outcome of the blackmail
it's not just blackmail as in like we're going to out you as a homosexual. It's blackmail as in we're going to show like your naked photos to your family. It's not blackmail like, oh, your friends are going to know you're gay and then they're going to kill you. No, it's blackmail as in we are going to show naked photos of you to everyone. Now you have to collaborate with us. Revenge porn.
The logic there. Like, okay, so I get what you're saying, but like, how does that make sense if it's only being applied to gay people? It's like, wouldn't everybody
it's not just
have
gay
naked
people,
photos?
but gay people are an easier target because they still obviously are, regardless of the legal status regardless of the legal status of like gay people, there's still cultural stigma. Like it doesn't change that reality. You are probably in the United States of America, you are more likely to be able to implement the exact same strategy in the United States of America, regardless of how fucking open-minded American society is. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
For sure. But we definitely are better at it than they are.
No,
100%.
You're missing the point.
Like
even if homosexuality is legal in the United States of America, you are more likely to be chastised. You're more likely to be outcasted as a gay person, especially if your family members don't know you're gay, regardless of the legal status of homosexuality. You are more likely to be stigmatized with blackmail and revenge porn in that circumstance.
I mean, are you really telling me that like you think that the stakes are the same
in terms of what?
Being
the stakes ultimately literally don't matter because we're still talking about a violent military occupation in the West Bank. So
yeah, Israel's bad. Like, I mean, for sure, Israel's bad. Absolutely.
I can't believe like I said,
it's been a while, right?
Still,
I
can't believe we're still going back and forth on like homosexuality in occupied territories. Like again, it bears no basis on whether or not these people are worthy of being subjects of colonial occupation. They're not. You know, that's
I think that it really
answer.
like you could sure. Like I don't really think it's that big of a deal either way, right? Like I don't really have like a super like my main problem is the fact that they do that.
By the way,
and
I do want to state something because like Islam is like by and large, Muslim cultures are by and large more tolerant of trans people. Remember what I mentioned about Iran, for example? Like even in Iran, you can get gender affirming care. As of 2008, gender affirming care in Palestine is legal. In 2008, Palestine adopted the ICD-10 classification, which contains codes for diagnosing transsexualism in adulthood and childhood, which authorized the initiation of medical transition. As it stands, however, there is no recognition of non-binary gender in Palestine. And there is still LGBTQ discrimination in Palestine with not enough protections. And employment discrimination and housing discrimination, which seems like a laughable concept to even invoke, considering the material circumstances of everyday Palestinians, especially as it bears no basis in, like I said, them being subject to colonial occupation.
Well, I think that it's important. Like, I agree. I think it's important for them to not be subject to colonial, occupation, of course, right? Why would I want that? Why would anybody want that? Again, it's also like very clearly, it's not like Israel's making them any better, right? So like if I have this viewpoint, I think this, Israel's doing this, if it's Israel's outcome, well, then the outcome isn't very good. So you might as well let them do their own thing, right? I agree with you. Sure.
Yeah, if they're going to be homophobic and Israel's killing them versus they're going to be homophobic and Israel's not killing them, I prefer the they're going to be homophobic and Israel's not killing them outcome. I think we can agree on that, right? Especially if we both come to the recognition that Israel killing them is not going to combat homophobia at all.
Okay. All right. We can come to that agreement.
Okay, great. All right, perfect. That's it.
Yeah,
and beyond
we
that,
can
like
do
I
that.
said, it's not it's not as black and white as like Palestinian culture inherently is homophobic or anything like that. And we are all, again, we are all products of our own material conditions and our circumstances.
I certainly hope that they're able to make things better. I do.
One day.
One day, sure.
One day they can. One day they can also argue amongst themselves about whatever game developer is making
Ubisoft,
gay people
with the gay black samurai.
Yeah, Ubisoft Palestine. A lot of Palestinians are going to be up in arms.
Right. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Asmongold.
No, for sure. And I can see your point of view. I hope that you can see my point of view to an extent. You don't have to agree with me, but I think that my perspective here is not totally crazy, and I can see where you're coming from too. And for sure.
All right.
I don't think that you're like okay with it, and etc.
All right. I would also, like I said, talk to you have friends out there that that have similar opinions to mine. You have friends out there that are of Palestinian descent or Muslims as well that you can talk to about this kind of thing. And I hope that they can give you personal anecdotes that are a little bit better than what I can explain to you through historical relevance.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. And I probably will. You know what? I probably will. I find this stuff interesting. I like talking about it. I know a lot of people like to turn things into hostility. I enjoy conversations like this. I think that you do too. That's probably why we've been doing it for like, I don't even fucking know how long. So I have no problem discussing it and talking about it and debating about it all day. It's no problem.
Okay. All right. Well, have a good one.
You too, man. I'll see you later.
All right. Bye.